So I would ask that you come in and begin to take your seats. I am going to recess it for about 5 minutes because I'm told that there still is a line of folks just trying to check in. So I'm going to give them 5 minutes or so we can kind of clear the registrar's table and get those initial people in. But if the rest of you would come in and begin to take your seats. As is our custom, we have a non-voting section to my right. The bleacher section on my right is the non-voting section. Anyone who isn't in possession of one of these cards has to be in that non-voting section. And conversely, anybody in that non-voting section's got one of these cards. You won't be counted unless you move to the floor. Thank you, and we'll get started in about 5 minutes. Yeah, because you know. Okay, I'm now going to call us back to order from the recess. As you know, I declared a quorum present. Before I get to announcements, I'd ask you all to rise and we pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A couple of announcements before we get started. A quorum in Harwich at town meeting is 150. I'm pleased to say we're far in excess of 150, and I'll have a total for you later this evening from the town clerk. There's no smoking whatsoever in this building or on the grounds of this building, just a reminder. Please shut off your cell phones and electronic devices. Obviously, emergency personnel, that doesn't apply, but anyone else, please now silence those cell phones and electronic devices. We do have a screen this evening to assist those who need it. It will be in use all evening, and there's plenty of seats down here to my left in front if you want to rely on the screen. If there's a hearing impairment or other impairment, please feel free to come down and sit. There are several rows here to my left. As I announced at the beginning, you need a voter card in order to participate. Just a reminder, that voter card tonight is yellow. You need a yellow voter card in order to be in the hall. If you don't have one, you've got to be in that non-voting section, which is the bleacher section directly to my right. For those of you who haven't been to Harwich Town Meeting before, our rules of procedure are local in nature. They were adopted by the town meeting, and they're applied to Harwich. Your selectmen have them printed in the warrant. Not all of the local bylaw procedures, but they do have the central ones on page 4. And most importantly, perhaps they always print for you a copy of the motion chart, which is part of our bylaw. And that chart tells you what motions are in order at a Harwich Town meeting, what quantum of vote is necessary, whether they're debatable. And I will be using that chart in the course of the procedure here at town meeting. For matters that aren't in the local bylaw, we look to town meeting time, which is the handbook of the Massachusetts Moderators Association. All motions are required to be in writing at a Harwich Town meeting. That includes any motions to amend. So if you make a motion from the floor, I'll ask that you have it prepared and have it in writing. It's very important for the town clerk to be able to have a record of the proceedings at the meeting, and that starts with having motions in writing. The process here in Harwich is that I read each article, except for those that I'm going to announce are of such length that I will not read them in their entirety, and I'll give you a heads up as to which ones those are in a moment. Once I've read the article, I turn to the chairman of the Finance Committee or his designee, and if they have a positive motion, they'll make that motion, and that puts the matter on the floor for discussion. If the Finance Committee does not have a positive motion, then I will go to the floor to see whether anyone else has a positive motion. And if they have it, it'll be made, and that will put the matter on the floor. If no positive motion is forthcoming, our bylaw directs me to go back to the Finance Committee, who then makes a motion to indefinitely postpone, and the meeting acts on that motion for indefinite postponement, up or down. And that's the process that we will follow on each one of the articles in the warrant. The articles in the warrant that I'm not going to read in my entirety, or in their entirety, I should say. Article 4, the operating budget. It's a short narrative in your warrant, but it refers to Appendix B, which is in the back of your warrant book and consists of a number of pages. And so I want to make sure that you've had a chance to look at that and familiarize yourself with it. Obviously, any aspect of the budget is open for discussion within the four corners of the motion on the budget. I'll also not read in its entirety Article 8. It's the capital plans on pages 11 through 16 of your warrant. Article 38, which is an authorization to purchase a conservation restriction in the so-called Marini property, which is up at the headwaters of Muddy Creek. I'm not going to read that entire article. That's on page 31, if you want to take a look at that ahead of time. And also, as far as tonight goes, Article 45, which is a new proposed bylaw to regulate door-to-door canvassing in town. I'm not going to read that in its entirety either. I'll now recognize Mrs. Doucette, our town clerk, for the return of the warrant.
Commonwealth of Massachusetts Town of Harwich Annual Town Meeting, May 2nd, 2016, Barnstable County. To either of the constables of the Town of Harwich in said county, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of said town, qualified to vote in elections and town affairs, to meet in the Community Center Gymnasium, 100 Oak Street in said town, on May 2nd, 2016, at 7 p.m. Then and there to act on the following articles. Hereof, fail not to make return of the warrant with your doings thereon at the time and the place of said meeting, given under our hands the 7th day of March, 2016. Signed, Peter S. Hughes, Chair. Linda A. Sabula, Vice Chair. Michael D. McCaskill, Board of Selectmen. A true copy attest, signed David A. Robinson, Constable. April 12th, 2016, by virtue of this warrant, I have this day notified and warned the inhabitants of the Town of Harwich qualified to vote in elections and town affairs to meet in the Community Center, 100 Oak Street in said town on Monday, the 2nd of May, 2016, at the time and the place for the purpose herein named by posting up attested copies thereon in the 4 post office buildings and in the Community Center in the Town of Harwich, which covers all 4 precincts, at least 14 days before the time of said meeting, as within directed, and causing an attested copy thereof to be published in the Cape Cod Chronicle, published in Barnstable County, and having its circulation in the Town of Harwich. Signed, David A. Robinson, Constable.
Thank you, Mrs. Doucette. Just 2 other quick matters. There is complimentary coffee out there tonight, Friends of the South Harwich Meeting House, so feel free to imbibe in coffee this evening. And secondly, it was brought to my attention by a voter just a few moments ago, and if you've seen our annual report, you'll see that in the inside cover, it's dedicated in part to Dave Scannell. And the observation of the voter as he came up to the podium a few minutes ago, he said to me, you know, there's a hole in the wall at the back wall of the community center. And I didn't really understand what he meant for a minute. And then as I focused on it, I realized that's where Dave used to stand for 31 years. And this will be my first town meeting in 31 years that David hasn't been here. And just wanted to recognize that and say, Dave, this one's for you. Article 1, to choose various town committees and officers. Mr. DeCosta.
I move this article be accepted and adopted.
Second. It's moved and seconded that Article 1 be accepted and adopted. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. This time the moderator makes the following appointments. I appoint Mr. John Chori to a 3-year term on the Finance Committee, expiring June 30th, 2019. I appoint Laura Gillespie Lee to a 3-year term on the Finance Committee, expiring June 30th, 2019. And I reappoint, I should say, Noreen Donahue, who's agreed to serve another term, a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2019. Also like to thank a couple of members who got off this year, Mr. Jonathan Eidman and Pam Groswald, for their service to our town and to the Finance Committee. I'll make the other of these additional appointments at this time. I appoint James B. Stinson, Esquire, to a 3-year term as a trustee of the Caleb Chase Trust Fund. I appoint our building commissioner, Mr. Aquina, as the surveyor of wood and lumber, and I reserve the right to make any other appointments at a later time. Article 2, to hear reports of all town officers and committees for the year 2016. Mr. DeCosta.
I move this article be accepted and adopted.
Second. So moved and seconded that Article 2 be accepted and adopted. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. I now recognize Mr. DeCosta for the Finance Committee's annual report.
Good evening. We have turned a corner. Over the past few years, we have had to meet the financial challenges of a new regional school system. There was an override, new debt added, and we pushed the allowed 2.5% annual increase to the max. And we still had to resort to capital exclusions, 1-year tax increases to purchase needed items. It became as though the 1-year tax was an ever-increasing annual tax. During this time, employees went without raises, less attention was paid to town buildings, and departments attempted to do more with less. A change was needed. Even as we went through these rough financial times, the Finance Committee encouraged and supported efforts by the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator and his financial team and town leaders with the need to push our financial rating from a AA+ to a AAA rating. We knew that even if we didn't make it, the journey would be good for the town's financial outlook. Many of the efforts were small. A slight increase in the overlay account here, a little money in stabilization account there, conservative receipt estimates, and turnbacks from departments to support free cash, and our reserves. And little by little, the small steps turned into major strides, and this year, all the pieces fell into place. Because of the better-than-expected free cash outlook, the Board of Selectmen included the need to give the taxpayers a break by asking the town administrator to submit a balanced budget that didn't contain one-year capital exclusion tax increases to balance it. The next big piece to fall into place was the budget turned in by the school committee. Although it was still an increase larger than 2.5%, at 3.8%, it was a major step in the right direction. The town administrator fit the school increase into his overall budget and was still able to meet many of the needed items on the municipal side. After seeing how all the pieces fit together, the Finance Committee voted the Monomoy Regional School District operating budget back in February. Shortly thereafter, the Finance Committee voted the tech budget, the water budget, and after the numbers were finalized, we voted the municipal budget. For the first time in 2 decades, the town certified over $4 million of free cash. The Finance Committee was able to use this money and other available funds to recommend many of the requests in this year's warrant, and still have a healthy balance to put into our savings account. We are recommending over $1 million for much-needed building repairs. We are restoration projects and maintenance. We are recommending close to $1 million for vehicles and equipment. We are doing all of this without resorting to capital exclusions. We have indeed turned a corner. We have turned a corner, but we are not out of the woods yet. To ensure that this good fortune of this year carries into the future, we will need to continue the steps we have taken to get here. We will need to see the Board of Selectmen show leadership in their budget messages. We will need the town administrator to continue his balancing act with the budgets. We will need the school committee and the other committees to reduce the amounts of their annual increases. We will need to work in many major upcoming capital projects dealing with wastewater and the land side of the Saquatucket Harbor and the Station 2 rehab. Our 7-year capital plan has over $75 million worth of projects identified on it. Finally, we will need the Finance Committee to continue to represent you, the taxpayers of Harwich, at every table we sit at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeCosta. Article 3, see if the town will vote to fix the salaries of the elected officials of the town for fiscal year commencing July 1, 2016 and ending June 30, 2017 as follows, and to act fully thereon. Selectmen 5, $1,500 each, moderator $300, town clerk $75,397, water commissioners 3, $500 each. Have a motion.
I move this article be accepted and adopted as follows. Selectmen 5, $1,500 each, moderator $300, town clerk $75,397, water commissioners 3, $500 each.
All right, the motion's been made and seconded. It moves the article as printed. There's no changes. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 4. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds such sums of money as may be required to defray town charges for fiscal year 2017 and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
All right, first long one. Here we go. I move this article be accepted and adopted as amended by adjusting Appendix B revenues, line 17, cable fund to read $129,237. Line 20, FEMA, $13,736. And to revise line 26, total revenue to $59,564,757. Otherwise, as printed in the warrant, Appendix B, under column titled Town Meeting Budget FY 2017. Total town less line items 102, 104, and 105 are unappropriated state, commission, and county assessments, and the sum of $32,547,577 be appropriated for this purpose. That to raise this appropriation, the sum of $31,363,951 be raised and appropriated, and that $587,382 be raised and appropriated in the general fund operating budget and allocated to the Water Enterprise Fund for funding, and that $129,237 be transferred from the cable fund, and that $221,108 be transferred from the betterment funds, and that $125,000 be transferred from overlay surplus, and that $13,736 be transferred from the FEMA fund, and $107,163 be transferred from the Harbor Capital Fund. Further, to transfer from the adopted budget $100,000 out of line 109 Group Health Insurance into the other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund created under Article 46 of the 2013 Annual Town Meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on Article 4, and there are a number of changes in it to Appendix B, if you were following along. And as I reported to you at the beginning of the meeting, Appendix B is what you're voting on, the last column, the right-hand column in Appendix B. And I'm just going to review those items in the motion that are different than Appendix B. It was line 17, which is the cable fund, and it's been changed to read $129,237. Line 20, FEMA, changed to read $13,736. And line 26, total revenue, to be changed to $59,564,757. Otherwise, Appendix B is just as it's printed in your warrant. That's the far right-hand column. And the totals are the same. And they point out in this motion that lines 102, 104, and 105 are not being raised under this motion because those are unappropriated state, commission, and county assessments. So the figures are the same except for those. Goes on to fund the budget through raise and appropriate. That's through the tax levy of $31,363,951. And that $587,382 be raised appropriated in the general fund and allocated to water enterprise funding. And then there are various other transfers from the cable fund, the betterments fund, and the overlay surplus and FEMA that are transferred. Finally, there's a provision in this motion that $100,000 out of budget line item 109, group health insurance, be transferred under OPEB, which is Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund, created under Article 46 of 2013. Now, our town charter, before I can go to debate, requires that the Board of Selectmen present the budget to town meeting, and I will recognize Chairman of the Selectmen, Mr. Peter Hughes, to make that presentation. Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I don't know how to follow all that, but we'll try. I'd like to give you a little bit of historic perspective, if you will. As I look out here, I see many of you have been here many years, and a lot of new faces as well. Some people are new to town government. Good evening, and thank you for participating in your town government. It's our time as a town to come together to conduct the business of the town of Harwich. For those of you who don't know, Harwich was settled in 1670, incorporated September 14th, 1694. That's 322 years ago. Mike, were you still moderator back then?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. Since I'm a firm believer, since I'm a firm believer that the more things change, the more they stay the same, I want to share a few historical items with you about Harwich before we get to the budget items. The Civil War era population of Harwich in 1860 was recorded as 3,423. By 1900, it had declined to 2,334, and by pre-World War II, that's 1940, it had risen to 2,535. The 60s and 70s saw a run-up in population, which reached 8,971 in 1980. Many of you remember in the late 80s and early 90s, we were talking about a potential build-out of some 20,000 people. I would say, fortunately, our population has been relatively stable in the 21st century. In 2010, we reached a population of 12,243, and in 2015 census, that established our population at 12,432, so pretty stable. In preparation for this town meeting, I looked back at the 1940 annual report for some perspective. Looks like this. It's an orange book. They used to always be orange. In 1940, we had a moth department, inspector of slaughtering, and an inspector of animals. Total expenditures for 1940 were $278,154.18. Total assessed taxes were $172,129.04, of which $158,383.92 are real estate taxes. Total receipts were $74,219.18, and that moth tax generated $1,086.63. Maybe we should think about bringing it back. $1,700 was appropriated for repairs of public buildings, of which only $211.56 was spent on public buildings. Our school budget then was $55,672.02. The annual town meeting warrant consists of 60 articles, of which Article 44, which was accepted and adopted, the amount of $4,000, installed an automatic sprinkler system in the Exchange Hall. And now a look at the current year. Some of the many significant accomplishments in the last 12 months include the following: replacement of the pier at Witchmere Harbor, acquisition of the Hall property at Bell's Neck, that's 4.1 acres of open space, design of the new Sacotucket Harbor waterside facilities, you'll hear more about that this evening, completion of the purchase of the Downey property adjacent to Sacotucket Harbor and removal of the old buildings on the property, construction of an artificial reef in Nantucket Sound with the expectation of improving recreational fishing opportunities, the generation of more than 3.5 million kilowatt hours of solar energy at the landfill site, initiation of the replacement of Money Creek Bridge between Harwich and Chatham, which should, by the way, be open to traffic by Memorial Day, a volunteer-led effort to revitalize the Albert House and Harwich Center. We provided and continue to provide exceptional services to our seniors through the Council on Aging and provided top-notch recreational opportunities for our kids, seniors, and everybody in between. To provide some guidance as to the future of the middle school property, a non-binding ballot question was developed for your consideration, and we completed and submitted the Town of Harwich Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan for regulatory review. We initiated and continued discussions and negotiations with the town of Chatham to eventually send up to 300,000 gallons of sewage from East Harwich area to the existing Chatham treatment plant, which has excess capacity. We worked to procure the Marini property. You'll hear more about that in this meeting, at the headwaters of Muddy Creek, and you can see from all of this that our near-term wastewater efforts are focused on the Pleasant Bay watershed. We continue our efforts to catch up, or try to catch up, with building maintenance, including HVAC and roof replacements at Station 1, repairs to our DPW facility, and replacement of stairways at various beaches. None of these accomplishments would be possible without the efforts of the many volunteers who work tirelessly on your behalf and our behalf in support of local government. Harwich has many boards, committees, councils, and commissions with numerous contributors. These are the folks that make things happen in our community. And I would just ask for 8 seconds, anyone who has volunteered to do anything in this town at this point in time, raise your hand. Let's see your hands. Come on, you got them. Okay, thank you very much for all your help. For the 2016 annual town meeting, you were presented with 65 articles at the annual town meeting, plus 4 articles in a special town meeting to be held within that annual. We are seeking your support for a town budget of $32,547,500 excuse me, and $57. On our regional school district budget of $24,058,302, Cape Cod Technical High School budget of $1,437,053, and a Water Department budget of $3,939,879. If you add all those numbers up, you get a total budget request of almost $62 million, which represents approximately 3.7% increase. The town portion of the budget includes the addition of a plumbing position within the building maintenance team, a police officer to provide more focus on the opioid problem, and a part-time conservation person. Also included is Harwich's support for an Alzheimer's Day program, which assists some of our most in-need individuals and especially their families. The most significant capital project for your consideration is the replacement of the Saugatucket Marina waterside facilities. This $7 million project will replace and improve the existing docks, which are no longer safe and serviceable. The project is supported by a $1 million state grant and will increase the number of slips. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Saugatucket Harbor is an important contributor to the economic vitality of our community and a significant asset which merits an upgrade. The majority of the funds, you'll hear about this later, to support the debt service will be generated by waterways generated fees. The committee has done a great job at sorting this out. In preparation for this town meeting, we are fortunate to have received a free cash certification of $4 million. This will allow us to continue to focus on maintenance of our buildings and facilities, while at the same time making a significant contribution to our stabilization account. The recommended uses of free cash include facility maintenance and repairs, fire department ambulance, design of the Saugatucket Harbor landside facilities, DPW vehicles and equipment, supplemental senior exemption, support for private libraries, the promotion of the town of Harwich through the Chamber of Commerce, adding to our stabilization fund, funding the snow and ice deficit. The Town Administrative Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen have listened to the proponents of the articles and after thoughtful consideration, made their recommendations for your consideration. At this point in time, it is up to you, the participants in town meeting, to discuss and debate and decide for yourselves how you want to spend your money. We look forward to a productive town meeting and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. We'll now go to debate on the motion under Article 4, the budget. Any debate? Mr. Koukounis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the Chair of the Finance Committee, I have a couple of questions. On his very last I think the last sentence when he was telling us the different changes, removing line item 109, which in the printed version that we have in front of us, it is for the other post-employment benefits. It says OPEB, $100,000. And I believe the motion said that that $100,000 was going to be transferred to the OPEB reserves. Am I understanding that correctly?
The language in the motion, and I apologize you don't have it in front of you, Leo, but let me read it again. Further, to transfer from the adopted budget $100,000 out of line 109, group health insurance, into the other post-employment benefits trust fund created under Article 46 of the 2013 annual town meeting.
Okay, so I have two questions on that language. One is on Article 61 that we'll be taking on later on in this town meeting, we'll be transferring $300,000. Well, that's what's printed in here anyhow, and whether that'll go up or down depending on when we get to that article. Is that $100,000 that's being transferred with this motion in addition to the $300,000 that's being proposed to be transferred in the later article?
Mr. DeCosta.
No.
I got a yes nod from the town administrator and a no from the chairman of the finance.
Okay. We just tonight changed our position on Article 61, which will come up later, in order to do this one. So the $300,000 is just going to end up going into the Article 60, which is the stabilization fund.
Okay, and may I finish the
Mr.
question?
Koukounis.
While the chairman is still up, do we have a balance on the OPEB reserve fund as of this time?
Mr.
$600,000.
Okay, and then one final question.
Certainly.
With the removal of the 100,000 from line item 101, then it should in fact be dropping the town total from 33,831,000 to 33,731,000. Has that been calculated in, or are we including the 100,000 only because it's just been transferred to another area?
We're including it to raise it, and then we're transferring it out.
Thank
All
you.
in one motion.
Further debate on the budget motion? Hearing none, looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read under Article 4, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 5, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds such sums of money as may be required to pay for the Monomoy Regional School District assessment for fiscal year 2017 and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move this article be accepted and adopted, and the town raise and appropriate $23,833,578 with additional said sum of $224,724 to be transferred from free cash for the capital items to the Monomoy Regional School District budget for fiscal year 2017. Total budget, $24,058,302.
Motions are made under Article 5 and seconded that it be accepted and adopted. The sum is $23,833,578 with the additional sum of $224,724 to be transferred from free cash for capital items to the Monomoy Regional School District budget for fiscal year 2017. Is there any debate on the school budget? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 6. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sufficient sum of money as may be required to pay for the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School District assessment for fiscal year 2017 and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move this article be accepted and adopted, and that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $1,437,053 to pay its assessed share of the Cape Cod Technical Regional School District budget for fiscal year 2017.
Motion is made and seconded under Article 6. It's accept and adopt. The sum is $1,437,053 to pay the town's assessed share. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 7, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds such sums of money as may be required to defray Water Department operating budget for fiscal year 2017 and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted, and that the sum of $3,939,879 be raised and appropriated from the Water Department receipts to operate the Water Enterprise Fund for this purpose. Salaries, $1,187,998. Expenses, $1,319,351. Debt, $845,148. Indirect cost, $587,382. Total, $3,939,879.
Motion is made and seconded under Article 7 that the article be accepted and adopted. The sum is $3,939,879. It's proposed to be raised and appropriated from the Water Department receipts to operate the Water Enterprise Fund. It breaks the $3,939,879 into salaries, expenses, debt, and indirect costs. Is there any debate? Yes. On the slide? Well, thank you, Mr. Weiser. Apparently our slide to the right, don't be misled, is short $1. The real number is $3,939,879. Great eyes, Mr. Weiser. Any further debate? Hearing none, I'll put to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 8, and this was another one of the articles I indicated I would not read the capital plan in its entirety. See if the town will vote to adopt the capital plan for the ensuing 7-year period as adopted last year by town meeting with new fiscal year 2023, as proposed by the Board of Selectmen and set forth below, or as amended by the vote of town meeting and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted.
It's been moved and seconded the capital plan be accepted and adopted. Is there any debate? Mr. Larios.
Yes, Rich Larios, I'm the chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee. You don't have to go through the whole plan. If you go to page 14, there are two major changes. The plan was submitted in December of 15, and changes were to follow. It's a dynamic document. The number for the year 17 is $19,608,429 on page 14. Under wastewater, first change is the first line, IMA with Chatham Purchase Capacity C note. The IMA is the intermunicipal agreement that did not take place, or is not taking place currently. So the 10% of $9 million or $900,000 is actually deleted. And the next paragraph of numbers under water, the Lothrop Avenue water tank replacement construction was budgeted under the capital plan at $1.4 million. Under higher bids that you'll see in Article 22, the number is actually $2.2 million, and that change of $800,000 will be coming from the water retained earnings. So now you can vote on it.
Any other debate on the capital plan? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm Mary Romaine from Harwich, and I just have a small question on a line item. On page 12, under the heading Conservation, the last item is a line item for a dog fencing area at Thompson Field. And I know there had been some earlier discussion, but I'm not aware that a plan for fencing dogs at Thompson Field has been approved by the voters. I've looked through the warrant here, and I don't see the issue raised or discussed anywhere else in the warrant. And I wonder, is this plan going to be raised as and voted on as a proposal before this expenditure is approved?
Mr. Clark, question on page 12, Conservation, dog fencing area at Thompson's Field. Ms. Romaine is inquiring whether or not this is being funded at this town meeting in some way.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It was a request. The Conservation Commission withdrew the request, so there's no action contemplated for this town meeting.
So the line item has been removed from the capital budget?
The request has to stay in there because it was a request, but there's no funding that's associated with it. So
So
it
it's
wasn't
not being
adopted.
done?
Correct.
Thank you.
There is no money attached to Article 8. Nothing gets funded under Article 8. It is a plan, however, which is a guide, and under our charter, our capital projects are supposed to be brought forward for your consideration pursuant to this plan, but no money's being appropriated in this article. Any further debate? Mr. Koukounis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just have a question, and I apologize that I jump ahead, but I promise you I'm going to tie these together. Has there been a ruling on the request of the town spending the CPC funds on the West Harwich School and that project not having to be on the capital plan? I think it's Article 32 later on in today's meeting, but
Is it
seems like a major reservation and it should have been on the plan.
Mr. Clark or Mr. DeCosta? Who wants to take that?
I think if you look at the top of page 12, it does have the administration section, and the West Harwich School is on the plan. The third one down.
Leo, I know it's fine print. Page 12, under Department Administration, fourth line down. I can find it. Yes, renovation of West Harwich School on Bell's Neck. See it there? Yep, thank you. Okay. Any further debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 8, which is to accept and adopt the plan, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 9. This is an amendment to the Personnel Bylaw to see if the town will vote to amend the Personnel Bylaw by adding new language under Part 4, Compensation Classification Plans, to add a new section to compensation, which reads, first increment for new employees. Employees entering the service of the town should be employed at the first step in the appropriate salary grade if the town administrator and/or her designee consider the applicant's education, training, and/or experience justifies a higher entry level. The new employee may be assigned to a higher step. Next change is under Part 8, Vacations. Add a new paragraph to Section C. If the town administrator and/or appointing authority consider the applicant's education, training, or experience warrant it, and/or that the recruitment of a well-qualified candidate warrants it, the new employee, at the discretion of the town administrator and his or her designee, may be considered to have advanced time in service for purposes of placement on the vacation schedule. This provision is retroactive to July 1st, 2015. Then there's a couple of deletions. Delete the following language in Part 9, sick leave. An employee who uses 5 days or less of sick leave in a fiscal year will receive a bonus of $325, and replace it that if an employee who uses 5 days or less of sick leave in a fiscal year will get a bonus of $350. Do I have a motion?
I move this article be accepted and adopted.
It's a move that it be accepted and adopted as printed. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 10, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sufficient sum of money to fund the items in the table below, and further to authorize the selectmen to accept grant monies for chest compression system and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $89,900 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
Motion under Article 10 is accept and adopt as printed in the warrant, that $89,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose. Any debate? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 11. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sufficient sum of money as may be required to defray costs related to facility maintenance and repair for FY17 and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $561,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
Motion under Article 11 is accept and adopt. The sum is $561,000. It's proposed to be transferred from free cash for the purposes set forth in your warrant. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 12. See if the town vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to purchase or lease one ambulance for the fire department, and to further authorize the town to enter into a lease purchase agreement in excess of 4 years and to act fully thereon.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to purchase and equip one new ambulance for the fire department, and that the sum of $290,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose, and to further authorize the fire chief to trade in applicable vehicle toward purchase price.
Okay, the motion under Article 12 is accept and adopt. It is for the purchase and equip of one new ambulance for the fire department. The sum is $290,000. It's proposed again to come from free cash and to authorize the fire chief to trade in an applicable vehicle towards the purchase. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 13, see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from the Golf Capital Improvement Fund to supplement the ongoing landscape reclamation and restoration of areas adjacent to primary turf with necessary tree removal at Cranberry Valley Golf Course, as outlined in USGA 2015 report to the town and the Golf Committee, and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to supplement ongoing landscape reclamation at Cranberry Valley Golf Course, and that the town transfer $35,000 from Golf Capital Improvement Receipts Reserve Fund.
Article 13 is accept and adopt. The sum is $35,000, and it's proposed to be transferred from the Golf Capital Improvements Receipt Reserve Fund for this purpose. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 14, see if the town will vote to transfer a sufficient sum of money from the Golf Improvement Fund to construct 5 new forward tees in conjunction with USGA initiative known as Playing It Forward, and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to construct new forward tees at Cranberry Valley Golf Course, and that the town transfer $30,000 from Golf Capital Improvement Receipts Reserve Fund.
Motion has been made and seconded under Article 14. It's accept and adopt. The sum is $30,000, and it's coming again from the Golf Capital Improvements Receipt Reserve Fund. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. Article 15, see if the town will vote to establish a new capital fund to be known as the Capital Infrastructure Revitalization Fund at the Cranberry Valley Golf Course, pursuant to the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5F, to be funded by a new surcharge on all green fees collected in the amount of $2 and a $1 surcharge on all cart fees starting in the 2016 golf season, and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to establish a new capital fund to be known as the Capital Infrastructure Revitalization Fund at Cranberry Valley Golf Course, pursuant to the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5F at Cranberry Valley Golf Course.
So the motion's been made and seconded to accept and adopt the article to establish the fund as set forth in the article. There's no money in this article. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 16. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to fund the reconstruction of Saquatucket Municipal Marina docks, piles, and services, to include a handicapped accessible ramp system that brings the marina into compliance with the American with Disabilities Act, ADA, and dredging of approximately 12,500 cubic yards of material to bring the marina within the permitted depth, and to act fully thereon. The appropriation authorized by this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitation on total taxes imposed by Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, the amounts required to pay the principal of any interest on any borrowing authorized under this article. Further authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept any state, federal, or private grant monies available for this purpose. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that the town appropriate the sum of $7 million to fund the reconstruction of the Saquatucket Municipal Marina docks, piles, and services to include a handicap-accessible ramp system that brings the marina in compliance with the Americans with Disability Act, and dredging of approximately 12,500 cubic yards of material to bring the marina within permitted depth, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $7 million and to issue bonds and notes, therefore pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or any other enabling authority, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to expend all funds available for this project and take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out this project. Provided, however, that the appropriation and borrowing authorized by this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitations on total taxes imposed by General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, amounts required to pay the principal of and interest on the borrowing authorized by this vote. Provided further that while the entire borrowing authorized by this vote will be general obligation of the town, it is in the intent of the town that approximately 3/4 of the annual payments of principal and interest on the bonds will be paid from harbor receipts, and provided further that the amount authorized to be borrowed by this vote shall be reduced to the extent of all grant funds received by the town on account of this project, including a Seaport grant of $1 million, which has already been approved for this project.
Okay, the motion under Article 16 is accept and adopt, appropriate $7 million. It's proposed to be borrowed, and it is subject to a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion ballot question before the borrowing can occur. There was also an addition at the end of the motion that I will read, because it's not in your article, that the town, I'm sorry, let me just back up a second so I can put it in context. It is the intent of the town that approximately 3/4 of the annual payment of the principal and interest on the bonds will be paid from harbor receipts, and provided further, the amount authorized to be borrowed by the vote shall be reduced to the extent of all grant funds received by the town on the account of this project, including a Seaport grant of $1 million, which has already been approved for this project. This is a borrowing and will require a 2/3 vote when we get to it. Mrs. Corbett.
I just have a question. How will the operation of the marina be affected when this construction takes place? And is there going to be an intermittent loss of revenue while that is going on?
Harbor Master John Rendon.
The plan is to commence the project, the actual construction of the project, mid-October. We'll cut the season, this upcoming season, short by a couple of weeks, get all the boats out of there, clear the docks, clear the piles, bring the dredge in, and we have to be completed with dredge by January 15th due to a time of year restriction. As soon as the dredging is over, we'll bring the docks in, and our plan is to have the construction done by Memorial Day of the following year. So if all goes according to plan, there will be no loss of revenue. We'll do it in the off-season and have it ready. So that's the plan.
Further debate? Mr. Kukunis? You might want to stay up, John.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. No, actually, this is more of a finance question. I'm a little concerned with the language in the motion and that it is the intent. I know that where the road goes, that are paved with good intentions. Basically, what's going to happen here is this is going to go out for an override vote, and my taxes and the general obligation of this $7 million bond is going to be reflected on all our tax bills. However, I understand that there are some people that want to use a portion of the monies generated from the harbor to help pay down the principal and interest. My concerns, I guess, is I wish the language could have been a little bit stronger in actually tying a number to it, similar to what we do in the revolving fund, or the I know the water department is an enterprise fund, but my taxes don't go up when we go out for bonding on water projects, because that bond is being paid by the water funds. So I guess my question is, how safe am I going to be that this total $7 million is not going to be reflected on my tax bill next year? I understand it's your intent, but are you actually obligated to pay and not raise my taxes beyond the portion of that my taxes will be paying? Because obviously I think it's the intent of the harbor master to use the harbor funds. So I know it's confusing, but it's confusing to everybody, I think. So if you can help me with that one.
We'll try, Mr. Kukunis. Mr. Clark.
Mr. Moderator, I appreciate the question. A couple years ago, town meeting was asked the same question in terms of Witchmere Harbor, and we have kept to the word of what the intent was of that motion. So certainly from a legislative intent part, we will keep to that, to the 75%. When this was reviewed by bond counsel, we wanted to make sure that we avoided a revenue bond. If it was specifically a revenue bond, specifically tied to a revenue source, then the interest rate would be higher. It's a different borrowing altogether. So in the review of this with the bond counsel, it was decided to do the intent language with the idea that we would keep to the legislative intent. which we've done already, and that would be the plan going forward.
So this would still be a general obligation bond?
It would still be a general obligation bond.
So it sounds like the precatory language was the recommendation of bond counsel, Leo.
If I may,
Yes.
Mr. Moderator, one more question. Once the bond is issued then, and the good people that are sitting up there today go forward with this practice of using the receipts coming in from the harbor to pay 3/4 of this, will it then be tied so that it will happen for the life of the bond? Or will we be subject to when, as the people so graciously volunteer to sit up there, either the Finance Committee or the Selectmen, change 5 years from now and not decide to use that fund, and where you have the authorization to raise my taxes? I guess I'm asking for a little protection here.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Moderator, one of the things that we wanted to do to give a little bit more greater sense of comfort was we asked the Board of Selectmen specifically, would they dedicate this new funding to this project? And they did at one of the earlier meetings, they did do that. So we do have the legislative intent of town meeting if town meeting votes it, and we also have the executive of the Board of Selectmen voting that plan to dedicate those funds.
Thank you.
Further debate? Yes, sir.
Matt Cushing, Trails Committee. I'm a little puzzled about the widening of the gangway or the ramp for ADA compliance. Is that for wheelchairs? If so, has anybody thought about what you can do with a wheelchair when you get it down on the dock? Will there be a ramp up to the boat that is sufficiently wide for wheelchair access? A, and B, when it's low tide and the ramp is 45 degrees, how can they get the wheelchair back up again? Thank you.
Mr. Rendon, the harbor master, could you respond to this gentleman's question on ADA compliance?
Yes, sir. Part of the handicap accessibility ramp system that we're going to be constructed will have various ramps that will meet the loading platforms for each specific passenger boat that we have. We have 4 passenger boats: the Ferry, Captain Kidd, Yankee, and Perseverance. These are boats that are 40 foot or greater in length, and that is the requirement according to ADA that you have to provide handicap accessibility. So each ramp system that will be in place will meet the loading platform. So once you get to the dock, that dock will be at the same level as where they load passengers on their boats. And the length of the main ramp will be such that you never have such a drastic 45-degree angle at any tide, and that's all taken into consideration.
Does that answer your question, sir? Any further debate on the motion under Article 16? Looks like you're ready for a vote. This borrowing requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. I rule that it got the necessary 2/3 majority and passes. Article 17, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to fund the engineering, design, and associated permitting for Saquatucket Harbor landside renovations to include the Old Downey property, per the proposed site plan proposed by the Saquatucket Harbor Development Committee, and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to fund the engineering, design, and associated permitting for Saquatucket Harbor landside renovations to include the Old Downey property per the proposed site plan proposed by the Saquatucket Harbor Development Committee, and that the sum of $250,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
Second.
All right, the motions are made under Article 17 and seconded that the article be accepted and adopted. The sum is $250,000. It's proposed to be transferred from free cash. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 18. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer of available funds, or borrow, in accordance with Chapter 44 of Mass General Laws or any other enabling authority, the sum of $700,000 to fund the road maintenance program as requested in the capital plan for FY17. The appropriation authorized by this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitations on total taxes imposed by Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, the amounts required to pay the principal of and interest on any borrowing authorized under this article. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that the town appropriate the sum of $700,000 to fund the road maintenance program for fiscal year 2017, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $700,000 and to issue bonds and notes, therefore pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or any other enabling authority, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to expend all funds available for this project and to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out this project, provided, however, that the appropriation and borrowing authorized by this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitations on total taxes imposed under General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, amounts required to pay the principal of and the interest on the borrowing authorized.
Okay, the motion's been made under Article 18. It's accept and adopt. The sum is $700,000. It's proposed to be borrowed, and it is subject to a Prop 2.5 debt exclusion vote. Is there any debate? Mr. Kokunis.
Prop 2.5 debt exclusion, is this going to plan to be a capital exclusion or a debt exclusion? It's not a full...
It is a debt exclusion, I believe. Right, it's debt. It's not capital.
Why are we proposing to do this as a debt exclusion when it's basically we're putting the money up and getting it back and going to be paying it? Didn't normally we do this as capital exclusions as a project?
I'm being told by Mr. Clark that it's normally been a debt exclusion.
Okay.
Any further debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. Again, this is a borrowing and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. I rule that it got the necessary 2/3 vote and passes. Article 19. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to purchase and equip the following vehicles. One-ton dump truck, $65,000, Mack tractor, $150, an MSW trash trailer disposal, $70,000, and a barber surf rake for the beaches, $31,500. And to further authorize the trade-in or sale of the following old vehicles toward the purchase price. A 1999 Ford F-350 dump truck, a 1998 Mack 613 tractor, and a 2006 barber surf rake. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $316,500 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
All right, the motion under Article 19 is accept and adopt. The sum is $316,500, and it's proposed to come from free cash. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's an unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 20. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to purchase and equip the following: a Gator Turf utility vehicle, $20,235, a Walker mower, $13,300, 2 John Deere mowers, $9,674, a high-track skid steer loader, $65,000, and a certified articulating lift, $80,000. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $188,209 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
Motion under Article 20 is accept and adopt. It's $188,209, and again, it's proposed to be transferred from free cash. Is there any debate? Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 21. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to purchase a John Deere 2016 85G excavator and DAC fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted, and that $125,000 be transferred from water retained earnings for purchase and equip one new excavator for the water department, and to further authorize the trade-in, sale, or repurpose of a water department vehicle.
Motion's been made and seconded under Article 21. It's accept and adopt. It's $125,000, and it's proposed to be transferred from the water retained earnings for this purpose. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It is a vote. Article 22. See if the town will vote to transfer the remaining balance of $1,400,000 authorized to be borrowed under Article 10 of the May 2013 special town meeting for the purpose of replacing the Lothrop Avenue water storage tank, and to further appropriate an additional sum to complete the tank replacement project, including the payment of all of the costs incidental and related thereto, and to determine whether this appropriation shall be raised by taxation, transfer from available funds, or borrowing, or otherwise provided. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to transfer the remaining $1,400,000 from the appropriation voted under Article 10 of the 2013 special town meeting, and that $800,000 be transferred from water retained earnings for this purpose of replacing the Lothrop Avenue water storage tank, and further to including the payment of all other costs incidental and related to this project.
All right, the motion under Article 22 authorizes the transfer of the $1,400,000 from Article 10 of 2013, and proposes $800,000 be transferred from water retained earnings for this purpose. So the total proposed to be transferred from the article in 2013 and water retained earnings for this article is $2,200,000. Any debate on this article? Yes, Mrs. Corbett.
I just have an information question. In the explanation, there's a discussion about the exposure to corrosion causing the destruction of the tank, basically. Is there any way of repositioning it, or do we continue to run into this hazard even with the replacement?
Mr. Thompson, Water Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We went out to bid 3 years ago to rehab this tank. Our plan was to do just that. The bids came in, the low bid was $2.3 million at that time. Now, just a couple of years prior to that, we did the Route 39 tank at $1.6 million, and there was several $100,000 worth of steel replacement there. It seems the tank that's located at Lothrop Ave seems to suffer. The high end of the tank seems to rot away. We did work on this tank in '98. We did work on this tank in 2003. We seem to be fighting a losing battle on this tank. It's taken us all this time to decide what to do with it, whether to take it down and put another elevator up, or in this case, we're going with a lower profile tank, which takes us out of that salt air, that continual beating. Even now, I mean, we've had to do some work to get to this point, so that it seems the closer you are to the salt air, the more it's going to affect it. So hopefully this explains it to you. A couple of other things that have changed is the dramatic change in coatings for these types of applications with state laws, and changes in vapors and all this type of thing. It eliminated a lot of quality paints that now don't have the same life. What we may have got 15 years before, maybe we get 10 or maybe less. So it's an ongoing battle, and we're trying to take a different approach with the cement tank. We've done pretty well with Pleasant Lake, and we seem to be getting by okay at 39. The 39 tank is 1969, so we have done a lot of work to that. But hopefully that answered your question. If you have anything else, give a shout.
Any further debate on the motion under Article 22? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 23. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sufficient sum of money to fund the replacement of the existing supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA system and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted, and that $300,000 be transferred from the water retained earnings for purchase of a replacement of the existing supervisory control and data acquisition system, and further to including the payment of all other costs incidental to this project.
All right, a motion under Article 23 is accept and adopt. It's $300,000, and it's to be raised from the water retained earnings for this purpose. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 24, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow the sum of $9 million or any other sum to pay the entrance fee costs that the town will be required to make for the connection of the town's wastewater collection system to the town of Chatham's wastewater treatment plant, including all costs incidental and related thereto, pursuant to an intermunicipal agreement between the towns of Harwich and Chatham to be entered into by the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A. And then it includes a debt exclusion vote and a schedule of payments. Mr. DeCosta, do I have a positive motion anywhere? Hearing none. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be indefinitely postponed.
It's been moved and seconded that Article 24 be indefinitely postponed. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of postponement so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. The article is indefinitely postponed. Article 25, see if the town will vote to enact a sewer use general bylaw governing the establishment, construction, and operation of a wastewater collection and treatment system, copy of which will be on file in the office of the town clerk prior to town meeting. Mr. DeCosta. Anyone have a positive motion? Hearing none, Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be indefinitely postponed.
It's been moved and seconded that Article 25 be indefinitely postponed. Any debate? Hearing none, all those in favor of indefinite postponement so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. The article is indefinitely postponed. Article 26. This is the first in a series of Community Preservation Committee articles. And before we go through them, I'm going to recognize Bob McCready, Chair of the CPC Committee, for the Community Preservation Committee's report to the town meeting with respect to these articles. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Harwich adopted the Community Preservation Act effective beginning July 1st, 2005. Harwich adopted a 3% property tax surcharge, which is supplemented by the state by an amount dependent on other funds raised and is currently ends up being around 30%. The act required the establishment of a Community Preservation Committee to study and make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and the town of projects to be funded from these resources. The committee is comprised of 9 members, 2 selectmen appointees and representatives from the Housing Committee, Housing Authority, Recreation, Historical Commission, Open Space Real Estate, Conservation, and the Planning Board. This year, there was approximately $1.7 million estimated for new receipts in FY16 and approximately $3.4 million in funds available for projects. The Community Preservation Act also requires that 10% of the receipts be allocated to open space, historical preservation, and community housing, regardless of the distribution of funding applications. This transfer requirement is satisfied by Article 26 and results in 4 separate funds while restricting some of the funds to only be used for open space, historical preservation, and community housing. For the first time, the required debt service related to the old land bank debt estimated at approximately $633,400, is included here in Article 27. While this debt service is always funded from CPA funds, in the past the funding has been included in the debt section of the town municipal budget article. This change is recommended to increase transparency for everyone. This left approximately $2.8 million available for other projects. The committee voted and passed 13 applications for this round of project funding, utilizing $1.7 million. These articles are numbered 28 through 40 in your warrant. This year there were 3 applications that drew the most discussion. Article 30, restoration work to be performed on the town-owned Alborough House, primarily on the rear entrance and making accessibility modifications. The Alborough House has long been a source of debate related to its utilization. After considerable discussion and reworking of the proposal, the application received a positive recommendation. Article 32, restoration work to be performed on the town-owned West Harwich School, another town-owned property that has long been a source of debate concerning its continued deterioration and potential future utilization. The town and a citizens group came forward with a proposal to perform a level of restoration to the property with a functional use plan. The Finance Committee did not support this article, and I believe will speak to their perception of the weaknesses. CPC was persuaded that after much failed conversation about the importance of preserving this building over time and much working on this proposal to recommend moving forward, the town has committed to oversee the work on this project. Article 39, restoration work to be performed on the town-owned Brooks Free Library. Last summer, the library trustees began an education process for the town as a result of CPC-funded outside analysis having been done on the oldest parts of the library complex. There were many opinions offered, arguing with the analysis, which was the basis for the application for funding. In the original voting, this project was not supported. Further discussion was held, and in February, the application was reconsidered, and a new motion for less funding and focus on the building was supported. This year, the committee did not have any community housing applications come through to a vote, and we hope that there are projects being developed for next year. The committee very much appreciates both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen for all their work in reviewing these articles. The Finance Committee will make positive motions on all but one of the articles. We hope that you will vote to support all of the articles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCready. By statute, the CPC committee is required to give their recommendations to town meeting, and you've heard, Mr. McCready, that the committee has voted favorably to recommend all of these articles to town meeting. So we'll start with Article 26. See if the town will vote to reserve for future appropriations amounts from FY 2017 Community Preservation Act Fund estimated annual revenues as recommended by the Community Preservation Committee as follows: a sum of money for acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, a sum of money for acquisition, preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation of historic resources, a sum of money for the acquisition, creation, preservation, and support of community housing, and a sum of money for the Community Preservation Act Fund FY 2017 budgeted reserve. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that the town transfer from FY16 estimates revenue Community Preservation Fund the sum of $165,362 for the Historic Reserve Fund, $165,362 for the Open Space Reserve Fund, and $165,362 for the Community Housing Reserve Fund.
Okay, the motion under Article 26 is accept and adopt, and 3 transfers are proposed. They're all the same amount, $165,362, one to Historic Reserve, one to Open Space, and one for community housing. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's an unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 27. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act funds, undesignated fund balance, $633,400 to fund the debt service on the outstanding land bank debt, and any funds left unspent from the article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act funds undesignated fund balance and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move to appropriate from the Community Preservation Act funds undesignated fund balance, $633,400 to fund the debt service on the outstanding land bank, and any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act's undesignated fund balance.
Okay, the motion under Article 27 is accept and adopt, and to approve $633,400 to fund the debt service on the outstanding land bank debt. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 28. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Fund's Historic Reserve $3,100 to fund the restoration of the original fireplace hearth, firebox, base, and foundation at the Chase Library. And authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a grant agreement with the Chase Library. And any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act funds, Historic Reserve, and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $3,100 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion under Article 28 is accept and adopt. The sum is $3,100, and it's proposed to be transferred from CPC Fund Historic Reserve. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 29. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act funds Historic $11,000 to fund the restoration of an 18th century cannon and a 19th century millstone maintained by the Harwich Historical Society, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a grant agreement with the Harwich Historical Society. Any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act funds reserve and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $11,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion under Article 29 is accept and adopt. The sum is $11,000, and it's proposed from CPC Fund Historic Reserve. Any debate? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Brooke Williams, West Harwich. I have actually a couple of questions on this particular article. When it came forward to the Community Preservation Committee, there were three items. There was the cannon, there was this millstone, and then there was also a sign for the Harwich High School, the old Harwich High School, which was demolished. And the comments of the committee were that the sign were not within the historic bounds. Essentially, it's less than 100 years. And it seems to me, while this is not a lot of money, that we should really consider where this is being located. We're talking about moving a cannon, which is unfortunately maimed and killed people, not as part of its normal operation, but just it was unfortunately in celebrations, and moving it onto the grounds of the Brooks Academy. And if we're having a local craftsman to have a plaque on that particular site, we already have a plaque related to the abolitionist Jonathan Walker, and it's very appropriate at that site because in 1845 there was an abolitionist convention. They met at a Methodist church in Harwich in February, and then on a Saturday, and then on the Sunday they were looking for another location. Unfortunately, although we have a beautiful First Congregational Church, the Congregational Church, which has done a number of wonderful things in its history, said that they could not meet there, although they had support from a lot of members of the First Congregational Church. So instead they met across the way at the Brooks Academy. And they discussed a number of things, and a lot of people in town understood about Jonathan Walker, his plight, and they started raising funds. And I believe from Massachusetts, a third of the money that was raised, and this was through leasing land and other things, came from Harwich. And it seemed to me that rather than having a cannon that maimed or killed people accidentally, that we would have a plaque perhaps on that abolition convention. And then beyond that, when the town purchased it, had the foresight of this historic structure to continue its use. It served in the education of Harwich. And that is a period after 1900 within the historic. And we could think of the teachers and the students and the importance of that building in that time period. And I think that it says in the original, it's not in the town meeting, but it said in the application of the committee that this cannon would be in a historic location. Well, it really wasn't part of the Brooks Academy. It's not a military school and so forth. So would it face the church? Would it face the school, the thrift shop, the neighbor next door, you know, the traffic coming on there? I think this is an important place in Harwich. It's on the seal of the town, and I think that more thought should go into this. I'm sure there's a location. I believe the cannon previously was at Brooks Park. I'm sure there would be some location in some way in which issues of safety and so forth could be discussed, and that you know, this is very important, but it's not clear to me why this is being moved. And I believe in our town vision statement, our comprehensive plan, it indicates safety for all is paramount, and I think that vision is important, but why this is being moved. But I do believe that there are ways to have the education thing, not the sign necessarily of the high school, but having a plaque indicating the Brooks Academy's local importance and then its national importance in terms of the abolitionist movement, and that would add to the visitor experience in a way that I don't believe the cannon and necessarily the millstone would. And so I think more thought should be provided here, and I would note that some of this editing in terms of the original, the sign was modified by the committee, but I think more thought in this particular case should be given to this. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion under Article 29. Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. The motion seeks to accept and adopt the article as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $11,000 be transferred from CPC historic reserve, for this purpose. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. No. It is a vote. Article 30. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Funds Act Historic Reserve $18,700 to fund the restoration of elements of the front porch, addition of a rear porch, access ramp, and modifications, 4 doors of the town-owned Albro House. And any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the CPC Act Funds Historic Reserve and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $18,700 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion under Article 30 is accept and adopt. The sum is $18,700, and it's proposed to be transferred from CPC Fund Historic Reserve. Is there any debate? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Richard Gunderson. For well over 2 years, I've observed that the Board of Selectmen has been unable to get a plan together from the Administration Department that explains and justifies what should be done with the Albro House. It currently provides office space for 1 employee of the town, the youth counselor. Also, 1 room is rented on the 2nd floor. Until the time that a plan is developed and agreed to by the Board of Selectmen, I do not understand why public funds should be spent on modifying the building. I can understand maintaining it, but we're modifying the building. For that reason, I cannot support this article, and I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Any further debate on the motion under Article 30? Hearing none, I'm going to put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. No. It is a vote. Article 31. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act's Fund Historic Reserve $20,000 to fund continuing work on the inventory of structures in Harwich that are at least 99 years old, specifically adding 60 parcels to the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information Systems and performing more detailed work on a cluster of properties within the inventory. Any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to CPC Act Funds Historic Reserve. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $20,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion under Article 31, accept and adopt as printed in the warrant. The sum is $20,000, be transferred from CPC Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose. Debate on the motion. Yes, ma'am. Alice Kelly.
When I first moved back to Harwich, I began to look around and realize how much we were in need of housing for people who didn't have a lot of money. And I also began to notice that there were a number of houses in our town that seemed to be falling down without anybody doing anything about them. And being an idealist, I started out with my lawnmower going around and mowing the lawns in front of some of these houses to see if they could be made attractive enough that somebody would do something about finding families to live in them. I think of one particularly on, I think it's Great Western, 13 Great Western Road, and I spent many an hour pulling out bittersweet and doing mowing, and I'm still watching that house fall apart. I went to the town to find out who owned it, and I discovered that it was owing taxes. And so I wrote to the people who owned it and said, had they thought about donating it to give housing to people? So I'm thinking about when people are looking, and this house was well over 100 years old. It was built about 1900. I'm wondering whether that when the committee takes a look at these houses and does an assessment of how many of them there are, whether they might begin to make some plans to find a way to make use of them and make homes for families, rather than watching them turn into places where kids break in and have their smoking parties and the windows break and then the ceiling begins to collapse, and pretty soon what could have been a nice home becomes nothing but an eyesore. So I'm just hoping that they will think about doing that.
Any further debate on the motion under Article 31? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 32, see if the town will vote to appropriate from CPC Funds Historic Reserve $203,500 to have certain specific work performed on the interior and exterior of the West Harwich Schoolhouse. Any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the CPC Act Funds Historic Reserve and to act fully thereon. I know Mr. DeCosta doesn't have a positive motion. Mr. Lamantia.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant in the sum of $203,500 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion's been made under Article 32 to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $203,500 be transferred from CPC Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose. Any debate? Do I have a second? I'm sorry. Second. Yes, it's been seconded. Any debate? Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The West Harwich School Building, for those who don't know, is located down in the West Harwich area on Route 28, off Route 28, behind the Baptist Church. It has a neighbor as a cemetery, if you will. It's a town asset which is set idle for at least 2 decades, with people trying to figure out what to do with it. Last fall, fortunately for us, Lou and Sally Urbano took the initiative to get creative about restoring the building and bringing it back to life. If brought back to life, it would form a cornerstone of revitalization in West Harwich. If you paid attention to some of the Board of Selectmen's meetings lately, we're focusing more and more on activities to try and help out the West Harwich area, if you will. As they did with the Albert House, the Urbanos plan to use volunteers and donations to minimize the cost. Someone brought up in the capital plan, you'll see there's a 3-year segment of capital plan The total is something like $725,000 if done that way. But the Urbanos have made a proposal to us to use things like the tech school, the county sheriff's, I'll call it employees, if you will, captured employees, confined employees, if you will. The Board of Selectmen last fall issued a request for information to solicit any additional ideas for restoring and using this building with the town retaining ownership of it. And in all cases that we looked at, the town would retain ownership. Only the Urbanos responded to the RFI. To supplement and coordinate the good works of Lou and Sally, the town engineer developed cost estimates and would manage the project. The Board of Selectmen has been, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, on the South Harwich Meeting House. We thought that project could have gone a little bit faster maybe in some cases, and we thought by focusing the town engineer's efforts on managing the project, it would be a good thing to make sure we get the product that we want. As part of the restoration project, it's not often talked about, but something that's certainly important to me, and I believe the Chamber of Commerce. 2 public accessible restrooms will be created. These would be available to the public whenever the building is open. The CPC funds would be focused on the exterior and the first floor needs, and I think the Urbanos can tell you, if they feel like speaking, as to what their plan is for use of the building, but I just want to point out there would be public restrooms associated with this facility. There are none in the West Harwich area unless you want to go knock on somebody's door. You have to go to the Visitors Center in Harwich at the Chamber of Commerce if you want to relieve yourself. So, I think that there are a lot of opportunities existing in the area of West Harwich, and the schoolhouse would be a major accomplishment in bringing that forward. Again, it would be a crown jewel as to starting the revitalization of the area. You can look at this as the glass half full or half empty. We have some folks that have enthusiasm, are very concerned for the area, and see this as a starting point to try and save their neighborhood, quite frankly. Thank you.
Further debate, I see Mr. Gunderson. Is it up?
Yes, but I think Leo was up first.
No, please, Mr. Gunderson.
Okay. Oh, well, you sure? No, Leo, really.
It doesn't matter who was up first. I recognized you, Mr. Gunderson.
Okay, thank you.
They're already tired of me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Richard Gunderson again. I hate to play the Grinch, but I do not support this article as proposed, and I'd like to explain briefly why. First of all, this project is to convert an old schoolhouse to a boat building enterprise, and I believe it's separate and distinct from the larger activity as just described by Mr. Hughes, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, the larger activity being the Captain's Row. And therefore, this article should be approved or disapproved on its own merits. The purpose of this project is stated in all the supporting documentation that's been developed over time, is to solve a housing degradation problem in that area. These aren't my words, these are the words in that documentation. The proposal claims that there is, quote, tagging, drinking, and vandalism in the West Harwich schoolhouse area, and there is an underlying problem of illegal drug use and sales. Now, I don't doubt these statements, but I have not seen any information that supports that Route 28 in West Harwich has any more or any less crime than other parts of Harwich. And even if there is a greater problem, I question how a seasonal boat-building museum closed in the evenings and hidden behind a church and a graveyard would help in any meaningful way. Wouldn't the residents in that area want more law enforcement than to improve the situation much sooner than waiting 2 or 3 years for this project to be completed? So right off the bat, I'm not against the project, I'm against the purpose of it, and I'm against the way it's being developed. The next issue, the staff proposed to manage this project. It, to me, is confusing and complex. The Urbanos are the applicants, but the first contact person is the town engineer, followed by the town maintenance manager, and then the town planner. These are in the documents. I guess the town engineer is supposed to be the project engineer. Other documents call out the town administration as the lead in coordination. And then there is mention of the Harwich Historical Commission, but no specific role or activity. Then in another document, it states that there will be a dedicated individual from the town to work with the volunteers. No name of that individual or position. There's no clear definition in writing who is in charge. Also, depending on what's happening with high-priority projects in the town, it's not clear to me that this town staff can always be available. I would suggest that this management structure is not appropriate for this type of project. As described by Peter, the concept here is to use tech school students and Barnstable inmate crews to do a significant amount of the work. Who decides on what is supposed to be negotiated with the Barnstable inmate crew? What part is for the tech school? What part is contracted out under prevailing wage laws? Does the town know the parameters and boundaries of this joint participation arrangement? Is this a good model for the project of this type and size? I haven't seen any work breakdown structure or any level of efforts for the staff of the town engineer, the maintenance manager, the planner, and administration. Proposal says that it will use a model similar to the Habitat for Housing, but it really isn't. Habitat does not require a dedicated town employee for project management and coordinating volunteers. Habitat provides a construction manager on site all day, every day, who identifies team leads and directs the volunteers. I would suggest that the model that should be used is what the library is doing, going out for a bid, using prevailing wage estimates for a restoration company with demonstrated experience, together with architectural and management services to oversee, coordinate, report, etc. on the project. Oh yeah, and a contingency amount in planning for the unforeseen parts of the project that often come up. My next concern is that the proposal makes many assumptions and does not discuss important problems that may provide or may result in big cost impacts. I'll give you a few examples. As previously stated, the building's been vacant for about 25 years. The proposal assumes no degradation in the structure since a visual inspection was done in 2007. To repeat, that inspection was visual, no poking or penetration testing. I guess it's assumed that rot and decay only occur on the surface of wood. The proposal emphasizes restoring as much as possible. That's great. That implies removal of paint, probably lead paint. There's no cost estimate for that. Is the fire sprinkler system required for this type of building, given that it is a town building to be used for educational purposes? The proposal states that the Americans with Disability Act compliance is required after you spend the first $100,000. I'm not sure about that. I believe full building accessibility is required when the modifications are estimated to cost more than 50% of the assessed value of the building. The assessed value is $32,000. This is another unanswered question. The proposal does not adequately address the potential ground contamination problem, or plume, that has caused development problems in the past. Now, maybe there's a solution. Paula Champagne, Harwich Health Director, suggested recently at a Board of Selectmen meeting that whoever develops the site should hire a qualified environmental consultant. Discuss what you're planning on doing, have him or her review all relevant documents, and develop proper barriers to prevent mitigation of fumes into living areas. Is this activity included? I have no idea. Shouldn't this be done first before approving $204,000 in CPA funds? Down to the last one. One of the biggest assumptions that troubles me is that the initiator assumes he can get supplies and huge discounts and quality labor for free for much of the required renovations. The initiator starts with, and I assume he's coordinated this with the town engineer, with estimates that were professionally prepared in a study done 2008, 8 years ago. Back then it was estimated to cost $1.1 million to restore the building. Now supposedly, all the activities necessary to fully restore the exterior and partially restore the interior have been identified. Cost estimates for those activities average about 1/2 of the total cost that were determined by the professional estimates 8 years ago. These savings were based on the initiator's opinion of his ability to negotiate discounts from suppliers and to convince professional trades to volunteer or donate their services. Notice the proposal assumes no increase in labor or materials over the last 8 years, even though conservatively construction costs have risen at least 4% annually. A couple of examples. Electrical work was estimated 8 years ago, $40,000 by a professional estimator. Now that estimate is cut in half to $20,000 under this proposal. Plumbing work, $30,000. Now the initiator claims it can be done for $15,000. This all raises questions of how realistic the cost estimates are in this proposal. So in summary, even if you feel the project has merit, and I do, you've got to ask yourself, is this fully defined? Is it adequately funded and adequately managed? If you are a proponent of historical renovations, I would think you might be concerned with using this approach to restore a historic building. Last, some comments on the revenue model. The initiator claims that revenue from operations from this enterprise, quote, is a living maritime museum, building and displaying boats, wooden boats, will cover all operating and maintenance costs of the building and the site. As a tourist attraction, the enterprise pretty much duplicates in a very limited way what is currently offered at the Hyannis Maritime Museum that's been operating for about 12 years. Herring River is not Hyannis Harbor, and the JFK Museum and island ferries and good restaurants within walking distance. You have to ask, why would someone browse through TripAdvisor ever look to go to West Harwich Schoolhouse instead of the highly popular and well-located Hyannis Maritime Museum? Competition is stiff for this kind of boat building. As a museum, it's unclear what historic artifacts are available. No information has been provided. So I've talked a lot about the problems with this article. The good news is the proposal has brought attention to the area of the town that is seeking revitalization. That is an accomplishment in and of itself. In conclusion, I suggest this Article 32 contains a solution that doesn't solve the problem, has too many unanswered questions, has too many unreasonable assumptions, sets a bad precedent in the excessive and open-ended use of town labor, which I hope Leo will address, and a lack of contingency or risk planning. This overall makes this project, as it is proposed, an expenditure of public funds that should not be supported. I ask you to vote no on this article. Thank you.
Further debate. I had Mr. Kukunis up next, then I've got Mr. Urbano.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll quickly just say ditto. Thank you for that information. But I would just like to add a couple other things. First of all, it was referenced that this is similar to the South Harwich Meeting House project. That in no way is truthful. I was on the committee that came to the selectmen and asked to answered the RFI in the South Harwich Meeting House. We went out and raised money and put together a plan, spent and started doing things 5 years before we came to this town meeting and asked for CPC funds to put a foundation under that building. So if they want to model what was being done at the South Harwich Meeting House, then do that. I have a problem with the RFI that went out, the request for information, because it went out and it did not say, to my knowledge, that the town was going to be ready to put up $714,000 in the next 3 years to help you with any idea you might have on this building. We just recently, a few articles back, approved a capital plan. It was pointed out by the selectmen that I had missed that it was in fact in the capital plan, not only for this year, but for next year and the third year, totaling a request of $714,000. This building has been in front of this body numerous times over the last 20 years. I stand here and tell you I support the Urbanos in what they want to do. They answered an RFI. They want to build some kind of a museum there. Then all the power to you. Get together a 501c3, get together a group of volunteers, as Judy did with the South Harwich Meeting House, put together a plan and see if you can make it work. But to answer an RFI and within weeks have the selectmen agree that they're going to now fund $215,000 from CPC funds where no plan for the town has been brought forth before us. If you vote this $214,000 tonight, please understand something. Next year, they're going to be here asking for another 300, and the year after that for another 300, and you will have essentially voted to make this a museum or a boat building place. If that's what you all want to do, then fine, but I don't have enough information to support this at this time. This evening, you heard bathrooms. We're gonna now fund bathrooms up there? I mean, do all of you who are supporting this really know what the concept is and know what the final dollar value is gonna be on this? I don't think you do, because I certainly don't. Quite frankly, I don't even think the selectmen know. The Urbanos might have an idea where they want to go with it, but they need to fulfill their obligations under their response to the RFI and put together a committee, move forward, come back to us next year with a formal request, go through the process correctly. I have a huge problem with an individual applying, answering the RFI, and then subsequently the town, and that's who's asking for this, the town planner, the town planning and administration is asking for this. That's not the right process. And I'm going to say no to it, and I hope that you'll join me in saying no to it, but I also hope that you'll join me in helping the Urbanos, volunteering, and bringing it forth the right way, not this way. The 21E question was mentioned very briefly in the previous speaker. Please understand something. There was a affordable housing unit prepared to go out there, and from my understanding, it was stopped because federal funds will not be spent on that ground because there is a 21E contamination there. You need to know that because you're about to spend your tax dollars on that piece of land. Do you all know how bad that 21E is out there? Do you know what kind of chemicals are in the ground, where they came from? Are they moving? Our health director, as was stated before at a selectmen's meeting, suggested don't spend a dime of taxpayers' money out there until we get the answers. We need the answers. It's been sitting there for 20 years, another year isn't going to matter. Please vote this down, but help me and the Urbanos move forward and do this the right way and bring it back. Thank you.
Next, I had Mr. Urbano.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Leo. I'd like to thank the other gentleman. It's very difficult to follow when someone takes a look at a very traditional way of doing things and evaluating a project in a traditional way. It's very difficult to follow that because this is an out-of-the-box way of looking at solving a major problem that exists in the community. Leo, there is a 501 that has been formed. The Historic Commission will oversee to make sure that that project meets the historic guidelines. The town will supervise to make sure that the money is spent in accordance with CPC regulations and other regulations for town money, that making sure that the labor laws are fulfilled. That's the purpose of the town being involved. I came here a year ago, I went to the board and I said, listen, I've heard about this Albro House. I've been going to the committees, and gee, one committee says we can't fund it because it's maintenance. Another committee says we're not going to fund it because there's no use for it. And until we have a use, we're not going to do anything. And that house sat and it rotted. Maybe some of you remember when it was white and peeling. I went to them and I said, can we put a volunteer effort? And the same kind of objections started coming forth. Lead paint. Oh, it can't be done. Volunteers will do a terrible job. Has anybody driven by the Albro House? Is it a terrible job? Thank you. We're talking, when I say we're trying to do the same at the West Harwich Schoolhouse. We talk about detail. There is a 40-page plan with detail. The Community Preservation Committee asked every meaningful question that was asked here tonight and demanded answers, demanded emails, making sure that everything that was said, when I said that the tech school would do certain work. They required an email from the tech school saying, what do you charge? What projects are you willing to do? And wouldn't move forward without it. Every detail has been looked at. To me, at the core of this issue is really, can the project be done for $203,000? Because when I went to the Community Preservation Committee, it was made very clear to me, come in once, don't come in next year again. So your proposal better have a way of saying what happens if you don't get the grant that you're requesting for another $200,000, which would be a total of $400,000. What happens if you don't get that money? You better have an answer. We had an answer. How are we going to fund it in a long time? By a museum? My goodness, the whole plan calls for me funding the first boat at a cost of $2,000, which then sells to the general public through an auction. Habitat does the same auction. They raise $35,000 a year by building a canoe. It's a kit. We're doing sophisticated wooden boats. Can we raise $10,000, $15,000? Can we get people to come and visit it? I've got to make this statement. Maybe some of you saw the video from the, that was done from the drone on this area, on the West Harwich Captain's Row. In 1 month, 20,000 visitors went to see that. Will there be interest? Yes. The problem is when they come, there's nothing to see. Captain's Row isn't done. Captain's Row isn't started. We need to start that. I'm just going to give you some of the level of detail. The West Harwich Schoolhouse, its dimensions are 28 by 48 feet. That means the first floor is 1,344 square feet. The roof has a pitch of 812, which equates to 1,615 square feet of roof surface. This equates to 48 bundles of architectural shingles, composite shingles. Each bundle covers 32 square feet. 17, I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but I think this is important. 17 rolls of roofing material, 5 rolls of 15-pound felt, 9 rolls of 30-pound felt. Cost of shingles is $38 per bundle times 48, that's $1,824. The cost of the roofing material, $48 per roll, times 17 is $782. Cost of 5 rolls of number 15-pound felt is $18 times 5, or $90. I'm going fast because I'm sure you're just clicking away at these numbers. Cost of 9 rolls of 30-pound felt is $18 per roll. 9 rolls is $162. Total cost of material is $2,858. Tech school calculation is 25% on top of the material cost, or $621 in labor. For the roof, the Department of Corrections has agreed to do the work, not the tech school. That would be, we would have to provide lunch for each person. That's 6 people at $10 a day. That's $60. 14 days, I estimated. I did estimate 14 days. I don't know how fast they work. That's $840. To rent a lift to bring the shingles up and so forth for the month, $1,016. I figured we'd buy a porta potty instead of renting it because we'd use it for the whole time. That's $692. Total cost, $5,406. Plus 25% for labor, $621. That's $6,027. That's what's in the plan presented on this project. Every item from brickwork to carpentry to plumbing to heating and air, septic system has the same amount of detail. As a broad scope, the first floor is 1,344 square feet. Allocating $203,000 represents $150 per square foot. So I don't know how much more detail needs to be done. Someone mentioned the museum in Hyannis, the Maritime Museum. They're willing to work with us, providing instructors or running it if necessary. That's how important they see it. We have shipyards that are willing to have kids that work there come and help. We have gentlemen that have said, I want the second boat, Lou, you pay for the first one. So we have the start. And by goodness, we can always find reasons to say no. I made a living at saying no. Do you know how hard it is to say yes? Just think of when someone comes to your house and says, I want to start a business the way we want our kids to do here and to stay here. How many people say, here's all the 10 reasons on why and how you start a business? Or do they say, here's the 10 reasons why not to go into business? It's the same idea. It's hard. Is this a perfect project? No. It would be so much easier to get $700,000, not to have to drive out and get people from the Department of Corrections lunch every day. It would be nice to have a supervisor on the job instead of having volunteers on the job. But that's the way we can get things done in town without spending full amounts of money. The Albro House, there was a bid on it for $30,000 plus to paint it. I came in and said, I can negotiate prices. I'll get it done for $2,000. I believe we got $2,000, Chris? That's what it cost us to paint the Albro House. Almost 75% of the paint was donated. We can do the same. I've already had calls from a heating and contractor, heating and air conditioning, and saying, hey, if you need help, I'm there. There's plenty of people that will help if it has value. And this has value for our community, for our children, and for our grandchildren. So I ask that you please consider this and give the town another asset. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion under Article 32. Mr. DeCosta.
Not too long ago, an estimate from the town engineer to renovate and restore the West Harwich School came in at $1.1 million. If you turn to page 12 of your warrant, the third item down from the top is to renovate the West Harwich School with 3 different years, as Leo pointed out, $715,000. I rounded it. That estimate came from the citizens wanting to do this project just a few months ago, this past fall. Now in front of you is an article asking for $203,500. At this point, the Finance Committee does not know how much this project is going to cost you, which is why we're just asking you to slow it down a little. We have a really good scope of work now. It would be easy to get the actual costs. As the price has changed over the winter, so has the ownership of this project. This started out as a citizen group wanting to use the building to build boats. Now this is a town-sponsored program, which means this is now your project. And the Finance Committee feels that it should be done correctly and that you should know the cost before you vote. Even though the proponents of this article have talked about this for a while, this is a new project for the town. It was not part of the capital plan passed last year at town meeting, and this is the first vote any town meeting will have on it. Before you vote, you should know the cost and this could be done quickly. The selectmen are already talking about a fall town meeting because of the wastewater discussions with Chatham. And if this happens, this article could be ready to go by then. And we would know the total cost instead of just the guesses that we have before you. Finance Committee wouldn't be doing its job if it didn't let you know that we don't know what this is going to cost you.
Further debate on the motion under Article 32. Yes, ma'am. Is that Ms. Goldsmith?
Yes, hi, Vicki Goldsmith, speaking as a citizen of Harwich, but I also happen to be the Director of Habitat for Humanity of Cape Cod, and I would just ask that Habitat not be used as a funding model for building and selling boats, as was referenced. We make $35,000 a year on a kayak raffle because we're a Cape-wide organization, and a cadre of volunteers schleps that darn kayak up and down Cape Cod all summer long, and I just don't feel that aspect is a viable funding model for ongoing maintenance, or however it's being proposed, that it in no way proves that ongoing operating funds can be raised by building wooden boats and selling them. And I'm certainly hope that if that is part of the funding model for operating costs, that there's been some demonstration that there is a market for these wooden boats that are going to be paid for the operations of this building and so forth. I just ask that Habitat not be used as a model for that. Thank you.
Further debate? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi, Peggy Gabor. Is there in fact contamination? Do we have evidence of that in the soil? Because if that's a yes, that's a huge cost to remediate and an environmental hazard. So that would be extremely costly outside of, you know, the structure and buildings and stuff like that and fixing those up. So until you have like the DEP in to review it, I don't know, it could be a lot of money.
Do you want to respond to Mr. Boer's question on the contamination, Mr. Hughes?
I'll just say what I believe I know on the topic, and that is that I think it's, I won't say widely known, but I think it is publicly known that one of the dry cleaning establishment in Dennisport had some issues with chemicals at one point in time, and there's a plume that's migrated in a large portion of West Harwich, quite frankly, and it's well documented with test wells and that type of thing. In 2012, latest report we have was that the contamination is below the groundwater level, so the plume in essence flows out, and I guess you should be worried about it. If you're on the Herring River, it does make its way to the Herring River. So, you know, this site is one of many out there that have a plume under the groundwater. So at that time, the report states, I believe, that because the groundwater lens is there, that there is no upflow, if you will, of these chemicals into the ground, or up through the ground, and that it does flow into basically the Herring River at some point.
Further debate. Mrs. Urbano, did you want to address the meeting?
I think Peter answered it. I was just going to say what they're looking at is volatile oil within the air quality of whatever building they would be testing. And that was not my understanding for the West Harwich Schoolhouse, that in 2013 the EPA made a quick, an unannounced evaluation of the houses on the North Road, where the plume, which is underground, then at the North Road, that plume comes up and enters into the West Harwich, into the Herring River. And they did this unannounced evaluation of the homes in that particular area, and there were no volatile oils or contamination within the house.
Further debate. Who was up next? Yes, ma'am.
Ann Stewart. I just wanted to offer a couple other ways of looking at this that I had thought about. Already, tonight, we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars without batting an eye for various projects and interests all over town. Why, over $504,000 has been approved for trucks and other equipment for the DPW that may be only useful for a decade. Article 32 asks for $203,000 from the Community Preservation Fund to make improvements to the oldest unaltered schoolhouse in Harwich. This is a fund that is already in place, and 10% must be dedicated to each of the three categories: historic, affordable housing, and open space. The point is to launch the beginning of the revitalization of the part of West Harwich now known as Captain's Row. It is a way to keep the character and heritage of the ship's captains' homes and have their stories not be forgotten. With the National Register of Historical Places designation, there are additional opportunities and chances for grants that homeowners can apply for. It is important to know the town won't be paying for people's individual restoration efforts, but fixing our schoolhouse will be money well spent to help jumpstart the revitalization of West Harwich. And in time, existing social and economic problems could be improved. Every village in Harwich is interrelated, and our history is a shared one. So please vote yes on Article 32, and let's get the ball rolling to save this historic building. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Gentleman right behind you there.
Alan Peterson, East Harwich. I'd like to move the question.
Do I hear a second? Okay, a motion's been made to move the question. It means to terminate debate on the motion. It is undebatable and requires a 3/4 majority to pass. All those in favor of terminating debate on this motion, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. So we're now going to go to a vote on the motion. The motion before you is that the article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $203,500 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. I'm going to have to take a standing count. Do I have some volunteers for teller this evening? I've got two that have risen here. Third one over here, and Tom Evans was out there somewhere, had volunteered. Alan, you're all set. Alan, come forward. So raise your right hand, swear in. I just solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform the duties incumbent on me as a teller. Okay. So, we're going to divide this up. Alan, you're going to keep the front and the two bleacher sections. And you're going to take the floor section on this side. All right? Okay, you're going to take the floor section on this side. All right? And the people right behind the floor section that are on the wall to the middle. You got the front table and the back bleacher section. Yes, on the right. He's got to come to the wall behind this section. Okay, the tellers have been sworn in, and so we're going to take a standing count on the motion under Article 32. And so when you stand, you've got to show your voter card. Make sure you show your voter card to show that you're registered. So the motion again is accept and adopt. The sum is $203,500. All those in favor of the motion, those in favor, please rise and be counted. Mr. Thompson.
11.
11. Mr. Robinson. 37. Mr. Gabriel. 97. And Mr. Brophy. 8. Those in opposition to the motion, those in opposition, please rise and be counted. Show your voter card. We're still counting this section on the right, so please keep standing on the right. Okay. Yes, we will, sir. Mr. Gabriel, we're going to recount this section because some of the folks had sat down, so if you'd come back up, please. Okay, these are votes in opposition to the motion under Article 32. Please, everyone keep standing until, on this section, the count is complete. Thank you. While Mr. Gabriel is counting, I do want to tell you that he reported 97. His vote was actually 79 on his clicker. That was, so he just transposed the numbers. So if you're keeping track, Mr. Gabriel's vote, rather than 97, was 79. That was in favor. Okay, now we'll take the votes in opposition. Mr. Thompson?
21.
21. And Mr. Robinson? 51. Mr. Brophy? 25. And Mr. Gabriel? 44. Okay, those in favor, total 135. Those in opposition, 141. The motion does not carry. Article 33. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Funds Historic $25,000 to repair and restore 4 burial crypts in Mount Pleasant and Island Pond cemeteries. Any funds unspent from this article to be returned to Community Preservation Funds Historic. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $25,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Motion under Article 33 is accept and adopt as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $25,000 be transferred from Community Preservation Fund Historic for this purpose. Any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 34. I'm going to step back on this article, and I believe the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Hughes, will moderate.
Article 34, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act Funds Historic Reserve $100,000 to fund the final work of restoring the South Harwich Meeting House and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a grant agreement with the Friends of the South Harwich Meeting House, Inc., which shall include the acquisition of an historic preservation restriction by the town. Any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act Funds Historic Reserve and to act fully thereon by request of the Community Preservation Committee and the Friends of the South Harwich Meeting House, Inc. Estimated cost $100,000. Mr. DeCosta, do you have a positive motion?
Yes, I do, Mr. Moderator. I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $100,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose.
Moved and seconded to accept and adopt this article and the sum of $100,000 to be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for this purpose. Any debate on the topic? Yes, ma'am.
I have no debate, but I have a suggestion. The town owns various properties, including this meeting house, the Albro House, and so on. And I would suggest that maybe once a year, a selectmen's meeting be held at some of these places that we hold so dear as a town, in order to bring out the community and to let people realize how important these places are, and perhaps even see them for the first time. So a roving selectmen's meeting once a year might not be a bad idea.
Ursula, just now I can see you behind the camera there. Just a point of interest, the Board of Selectmen on 2 occasions in the last year have been to South Harwich Meeting House. The latest, I think the earliest one was last fall, if I believe, August, September. And then we went back again about 3 weeks ago in preparation for this article. It would be very difficult with the construction going on inside to do that, but certainly when we get to the point, and I believe the intent from Mrs. Ford, when we hear from her maybe, is that their intent is to finish this project up by the end of this calendar year and have a great ribbon cutting ceremony, and we could have a great meeting in there. So point well taken. The other thing is, I think just having open houses at these might make some sense. Further debate on the motion? Hearing none or seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. The motion is for South Harwich Meeting House, accept and adopt in the amount of $100,000 to be transferred from Community Preservation Fund Historic Reserve for the purpose. All those in favor of the motion, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. So, moderator, you can have it back.
Article 35. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Fund's undesignated fund balance $57,128 to replace the fencing around White House Field. Any funds left unspent in this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act Fund's undesignated fund balance and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $57,128 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated fund balance for this purpose.
Motion under Article 35 is accept and adopt. The sum is $57,128. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 36, see if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Fund's undesignated fund balance $29,700 to install a solar-powered traffic light system where the Cape Cod Rail Trail crosses Queen Anne Road. Any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act Fund's undesignated fund balance and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $29,700 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated fund balance for this purpose.
Motion under Article 36, accept and adopt. The sum is $29,700. Any debate? Mr. Robinson.
Jonas Robinson from East Harwich. My brief experience with these lights is that they malfunction frequently enough so that motorists learn to ignore them, and conversely, users of the bike paths assume that they are stoplights so that motorists will stop and therefore zoom right across the road without stopping or dismounting their vehicles. So I'm going to vote no for this. Thanks.
Any further debate? Mrs. Corbett.
I support the concept. My dog Banquo and I go very often and cross at the lights at Route 39, and the light malfunctions so many more times than I ever cross. And so if it's moved forward, let's get something that really works consistently and reliably.
Mr. Kukunis, are you up?
Yeah, I just had a question on the actual kind of light this is. Is this just going to be something that a bicyclist can hit a button and it will turn red and stop traffic? Or is this just the flashing lights warning the motorist that there is a bicycle crossing? If I could get that clarification.
Anyone want to respond to Mr. Kukunis' question as to what type of light this is? Mr. McManus.
These lights are set up to be actuated as a bicyclist approaches. The light starts flashing to warn the motorists driving on the road that either a pedestrian or a bicyclist is approaching the intersection, so they can exercise some caution. I do know, having had a family member involved in a rear-end collision at one of these intersections, had there been some flashing yellow light, as opposed to just having the bicyclist appear in front of her, it probably would not have resulted in an accident. I fully support these lights.
Further debate. Mr. Houston.
I agree that there's been some problems with the malfunctioning of the lights, but I think having the lights there, preferably working properly, would be a good thing. But I think having the light, even if it's not working properly, is better than not having anything at all. The biggest problem at all of these crossings, not just at Queen Anne Road, but all of the bike crossings, is that there's a lack of citizen understanding of how it's supposed to work. Pedestrians have the right of way at those crosswalks. Bicyclists don't, unless they dismount the bike. And the problem is that bicyclists often stay on the bike and wait for the cars to stop. And because of that, it creates a huge misunderstanding amongst the automobiles, the bicyclists, the pedestrians, and whoever else is even near those intersections. So I think it would help to have an effort at a public education campaign and even some public safety input to remind people what the etiquette is at those crossings, because that's the real safety issue. It's not the lights or their malfunctioning. But I think having the lights is a definite plus because it makes everyone aware that it's dangerous there.
Further debate. This gentleman over here.
Jim Chevrolet, East Harwich. He kind of stole my thunder. I travel that road every day, and the real problem is the bicyclists not stopping. They have the stop sign. I see bicyclists coming from both sides there that are coasting, in some cases pedaling, right up to the crosswalk. I think that my issue with this isn't with the money being spent. I think if it really is a safety issue, I think that really what needs to be done, and it could be done very simply, a couple of 4x4 arms right on that bike path to stop the bicyclists so they have to get off and go around. There's a bike path, bike crossing in Yarmouth that does that. Everyone has to stop their bike, dismount, and walk across. I think the real problem is the bicyclists, not motorists in that area. And I think spending $30,000, I think that all this will do is encourage bicyclists to not even stop at all. And I think it's setting a bad precedent.
Further debate. Gentleman in the middle here.
Ross Hall, 38 Braddock Lane. I totally agree with both of the previous two speakers. And I think you people have been sitting on a powder keg for a large number of years here. It's been an amazing situation for me that there have not been more collisions, more fatalities at the crossings, because the bicyclists do indeed think that they have the right of way when they pedal across, and they don't. And at Pleasant River Road there are signs saying, walk, do not ride, etc. But, it's hard to get off at 10 speed, if you have toe clips on, you've got to get all that stuff lined up again when you get back on your bike. But I think there should be some effort to make the cyclists, and many of them come from out of town, they're not local people who know our ways, that they do not have the right of way if they do not get off. And I think we've been, frankly, on a lot of borrowed time, slowing down, which is polite to let them bike across, but it does reinforce an assumption, I believe, on the cyclist part, that the traffic does owe them the right of way, and they can simply go right across. I assume it's going to look like the like the Route 124 crossing at the near Long Pond there, where they're, I think, flashing yellow lights or something. That's a caution light that says to a motorist, slow down, be careful, etc. It does not say stop. It may look that way if you're on your bicycle and you see a car slowing down, but basically you're trading on the ignorance of all of us motorists. And I think it's It's walking a rather short plank. I would hope that if this motion goes through, that there would be consideration to succinct and clear information to cyclists on the path that they are in fact at their peril if they cycle across, no matter what the flashing lights say, that they don't even see.
Further debate. Mr. Weiser.
I think the point that is being missed here, even though the bicyclists have very little regard for the requirement that if they want to be treated as pedestrians, they actually have to get off their bikes. The flashing lights will slow us down. We're all, or almost all, always speeding through these places, and we should be slowing down. So I'm going to vote in favor of putting up the flashing lights because they're there to tell the drivers to slow down. The bicyclists ought to get the hell off their bikes, but we also ought to slow down. So let's vote for this, and let's figure out a way to educate ourselves as bicyclists to get off the bikes and become pedestrians. But in the meantime, let's put the flashing lights up anyway and slow down when we're in our cars.
This gentleman in the middle.
Yeah, Matt Cushing. Not to kick a dead horse, but I live very near one of those flashing lights. 1 year ago, I called the highway department that the flashing light on Great Western Road was totally out of sync. It flashed when there was nobody there. It didn't flash when there was somebody there. And that's happened more than once. Now the same thing is happening to the light on Route 39. It flashes every time it rains. And it literally, it does. And what's more, I've seen people sitting there waiting to cross and the light is off. So instead of spending money on new ones, let's get ones that work.
Further debate, Mr. Whitteran.
Yes, I appreciate all the criticism people have about bike riders and the fact that these lights often don't work properly. But everybody's talking about different lights and different intersections. And I think it's important to understand that this particular location is Queen Anne Road, the road to the dump. And if you think about that, everybody here pretty much has driven down that road. This has got to be the most dangerous crossing probably in the entire bike trail. There's a lot of blind spots, cars fly down Queen Anne Road. Even a light that doesn't work properly. You could even argue that there should be a flashing light there permanently. So I would ask you to support this, particularly for this one most dangerous area. Thank you.
Gentleman in the middle.
Yeah, hello, Patrick Otten. You know, the Cape is known as a vacation area, so we get tremendous influx of summer visitors. One of the highlights of the Cape is the bike rail trail. True, we all need to abide by laws. True, we all have to behave courteously, but the light will reinforce that behavior and make sure we're all safe. I vote in favor of it.
Further debate. Looks like you're ready for a vote. The motion under Article 36 is accept and adopt, and the sum is $29,700 from CPC Fund Undesignated Fund Balance. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. Motion carries. Article 37. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Fund's undesignated fund balance $188,000 to resurface 4 tennis courts, half basketball court, tennis practice wall, picnic pavilion, ADA footpath, and 20-30 T-based parking spaces at Brooks Park. Any funds left unspent from the article to be returned to CPC Fund undesignated fund balance. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted, adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $188,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated fund balance for this purpose.
Motion under Article 37 is accept and adopt, and the sum is $188,000 for this purpose. Any debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 38. This is one that I indicated to you I will not read in its entirety. It's a vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, or eminent domain a perpetual conservation restriction on the so-called Marini property. A legal description follows. And it does propose the funding from Community Preservation Act Fund. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed, and the sum of $500,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund, with $150,000 from Open Space Reserve and $350,000 from undesignated fund balance. Further, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept a gift from HCT of $300,000 for this purpose, provided that any grant reimbursement shall be returned to the undesignated fund balance, and that any grant funds remaining shall be returned to the Open Space Reserve.
Okay, so we have a motion under Article 38. It's positive. It's accepting and adopting as printed. It offers the sum of $500,000 be transferred from CPC Fund, with $150,000 of the $500 from Open Space Reserve and $350,000 from undesignated fund balance. And then it further authorizes your Board of Selectmen to accept a gift from the Harwich Conservation Trust of $300,000 for this purpose, and then further provides that any grant reimbursement shall be returned to the undesignated fund balance, and that any grant funds remaining shall be returned to the Open Space Reserve. Debate under Article 38. Mr. Kukunis.
Mr. Moderator, I understand we're purchasing a perpetual conservation restriction. Can somebody tell me who's actually going to remain the owners of this property?
I see Mr. Locke rising. Michael Locke.
Mr. Moderator, Michael Locke, Director of the Harwich Conservation Trust. Thank you, Mr. Kukunis, for your question. Thank you to the town's Real Estate and Open Space Committee for sponsoring this and for the support of the Community Preservation Committee, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee. To answer Mr. Kukunis' question, the town will receive a conservation restriction over the property. The Harwich Conservation Trust has committed to raise the balance between the town's contribution of $500,000 and the negotiated purchase price, which is still pending. So Harwich Conservation Trust will actually own the fee simple title to the property. Thank you.
Any further debate? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Sounds like you're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 39. See if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Fund, undesignated fund balance, $540,000 to have certain specific work, including architectural services, paint, stripping, and painting, column and selective wood repairs, to be performed on the historic portion of the Brooks Free Library Building, the so-called Brooks Block and Bank Building. Any funds unspent from the article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act Fund's undesignated fund balance and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and the sum of $540,000 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated fund balance for this purpose.
Motion under Article 39 is accept and adopt as printed in the warrant. The sum is $540,000, and it's proposed to be transferred from CPC Fund undesignated fund balance. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 40. See if the town will vote to rescind actions taken under Article 42 of the May 2007 annual town meeting in the amount of $32,760 and return such sum of historic reserve, return such sum of funds appropriated in said article to the Harwich Community Preservation Act Fund Historic Reserve. These funds were intended for the restoration of the windows at the West Harwich School, which will now be done with funds appropriated under Article 32. Actually, we turn that down. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted to partially rescind the West Harwich School portion of Article 42 of the May 2007 annual town meeting, return the sum of $32,760 related to the West Harwich School portion to the Community Preservation Act Fund Historic Reserve.
Okay, the motion is positive. It's accept and adopt, and it's to rescind the action taken under Article 42 back in 2007. regarding the windows at the West Harwich School, and the sum of $32,760 be returned to the CPC fund. Mr. McCready, did you want to address this article?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. This article was premised entirely on Article 32 passing so as to avoid a duplication of funding. And with Article 32 failing, I would recommend that we do not pass this article.
Any further debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. The motion before you is to accept and adopt, which would rescind the action under Article 42 of the 2007 annual town meeting and return the funds to the CPC. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. The motion does not carry. Article 41. See if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 26G, to allow a member of the Board of Health who is also a septic system installer to work in the town in their trained profession, provided they do not act as an inspector for such work, and further that such work is inspected by an inspector from another municipality or a special inspector appointed by the Board of Selectmen as specified in the statute. Mr. DeCosta. Does anyone have a positive motion on this one? Seeing none, Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be indefinitely postponed.
It's been moved and seconded that Article 41 be indefinitely postponed. Is there any debate? Hearing none, all those in favor of indefinite postponement so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. The article is indefinitely postponed. Article 42. See if the town will vote to adopt Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 56. Upon acceptance of this section by the town, the Board of Assessors may grant real and personal property tax abatement up to 100% of the total tax assessed to members of the Massachusetts National Guard and to reservists on active duty in foreign countries for the fiscal year they performed such service, subject to eligibility criteria to be established by the Board of Assessors. The authority to grant abatements under this section shall expire after 2 years of acceptance unless extended by a vote of the town. Said change to take effect in fiscal year 2017 and act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant.
Motion to accept and adopt is printed. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote and I so declare it. Article 43. See if the town will vote to support the Harwich Board of Selectmen's request to the state legislature to pass a bill amending the senior exemption as provided for in Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41C, amount from a maximum of $1,000 to a maximum of $1,500 as a local option for the towns and/or as a home rule petition for the town of Harwich. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that the town authorize the Board of Selectmen to file a home rule petition authorizing an increase in the maximum senior exemption allowed under General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41C, in the amount of $1,500 as follows. An act relative to a senior exemption for the town of Harwich, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives in General Court Assembly and by the authority of the same as follows. Section 1, notwithstanding the provisions of Clause 41C of Section 5 of Chapter 59 of the General Laws or of any other general or specific laws to the contrary, the Board of Assessors in the town of Harwich is hereby authorized to grant a senior exemption in the amount of $1,500 to individuals meeting the qualifications contained in Clause 41C of the Section 5 of Chapter 59. Section 2, in the final year in which this act takes effect, the town of Harwich is hereby authorized to reimburse those eligible for a senior exemption under Clause 41C of Section 5 of Chapter 59 of the General Laws in the amount of $500. This act shall take effect upon a passage, Section 3. Provided, however, that the General Court may make clerical and editorial changes of form only to the bill, unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments to the bill prior to the enactment of the General Court, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to approve amendments which shall be within the public purpose of the petition.
Clear? Second? Okay. So we have a motion under Article 43. The article itself was an enabling article to authorize the Board of Selectmen to file special legislation, and the motion actually sets forth what that special legislation would be. It's not your warrant. So since you heard it the first time, I am going to just walk you through it again slowly here. The proposed special act is entitled, An Act Relative to a Senior Exemption for the Town of Harwich. So it's an act that just involves our town. Section 1, notwithstanding the provisions of Clause 41 of Section 5 of Chapter 59 of the general laws or any other general or special law to the contrary, Board of Assessors in the town of Harwich is hereby authorized to grant a senior exemption in the amount of $1,500 to individuals meeting qualifications contained in that statute. Section 2, in the fiscal year in which the act takes effect, the town of Harwich is hereby authorized to reimburse those eligible for a senior exemption under the clause in the amount of $500. And 3, the act shall take effect upon its passage. And then it has some standard language that allows the general court to make certain clerical or editorial changes in form to the bill only, unless your Board of Selectmen approve the changes. And then they can be something other than editorial or form. Debate on the motion. Mr. Kokonis?
I just have a question on, because I don't know, I'm not familiar with Chapter 59, Clause 41C, but does that require that we actually put the dollar amount of $1,500 in there, and we just can't leave it up to the discretion of the Board of Assessors? I mean,
I hear your question, and I see right over your left shoulder Mr. Waystack of the Board of Assessors heading to the mic, hopefully to answer that question. Mr. Waystack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kokonis, for the question. The state actually allows $500. Legislation was done years ago allowing a local option for a town to double that. We're looking to triple it. And the reason we're doing this, folks, is there are some very vulnerable residents in our community. This year, we granted 295 exemptions of some type for citizens of our wonderful community who could not make ends meet. And I want to put some numbers on the table so you can understand this. We had a number of people who filed for exemptions whose total income, a single person, was no more than what they received from Social Security, $11,000 to $12,000 a year, paying their taxes, their food, their medication, and their fuel. So we looked at this. We looked at Mr. Scannell before he passed away, and we looked at we're just not doing enough. And the only way to increase that as a community is to file legislation with the court to increase it another $500. So I strongly urge that you pass this in memory of our friend who used to stand at the back of the hall, Mr. Scannell.
Any further debate? So, Leo, did that answer your question? It used to be 500, local option to 1,000. This has to specifically say 1,500 in the special act. Mr. McManus.
I also, along with Mr. Waystack, would urge you pass this legislation. A month ago, the Cape Cod Selectmen's Association had a session where we talked about hunger on the Cape, and hunger is most found, or most seriously found, we feel, in some of our senior citizens that are really struggling to get by. And in talking to the selectmen from the collected towns, I brought up some of the work that our Board of Assessors have done, led by, in the past, Barry Hemian and Bob Neese, and continuing on by Mr. Waystack, Bruce Nightingale, and the newest member, who my name slips me right now, Jay. Our town does, I think, a wonderful job with our Board of Assessors managing, providing exemptions to make sure that a lot of our seniors who are really struggling can stay in their homes and have enough money to put food on the table. And it's by looking forward and proposing things like this that they've been able to do it. I think we should be proud of our Board of Assessors, because on the Cape certainly, and probably throughout the state, they are a leader in taking a proactive approach to this. So I urge you to vote for this.
Any further debate on the motion under Article 43? Yes, ma'am.
Barbara Ann Foley, Council on Aging Director. I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to say thank you to the taxpayers who have continue to support the programs for the seniors that we take care of. And Richard Waystack and the Board of Assessors should be totally commended for the work that they do. We dovetail quite nicely, our two departments, and the receipt of the seniors from the senior tax work-off program and other exemptions is just incredible. And I know they can't thank you, so I thank you on behalf of the seniors who are the people who receive these benefits. And it isn't really a benefit, it's helping to keep them in their homes and to keep them as taxpayers, so thank you.
Any further debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 44. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds to provide a sufficient sum of money to grant an additional $500 exemption to each senior exemption granted by the Board of Assessors to a maximum of $1,500 and to act fully thereon. Do I have a positive motion on this? Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $40,000 be transferred from free cash in order to provide an additional exemption of $500 for seniors eligible under General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41C, provided, however, that no funds may be expended unless and until the Home Rule petition authorized by Article 43 is approved for this purpose.
All right, the motion under Article 44 is accept and adopt. The sum is $40,000. It's proposed to be transferred from free cash. And the purpose is in order to provide additional exemption of $500 for seniors eligible under 59, Section 5, Clause 41C, provided that the special act we just authorized our selectmen to submit under Article 43 is approved. Any debate? Mr. Kukunis.
Thank you. I just have to ask, is this $40,000 for the $500 that Mr. Waystack alluded to? I'll use the term retroactive.
I believe it is, Mr. Waystack.
It's not retroactive. We approved 80 senior exemptions this year. That's where the fund came from. 80 at $500 additional will be $40,000. Can only be done once the home rule petition has been done.
Any further debate? All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 45. This is one that I indicated I would not read in its entirety. It's a new door-to-door canvassing solicitation bylaw, sponsored by our Chief of Police. See if the town will vote to amend the code of the town of Harwich under general bylaws by adding a new bylaw under Chapter 214, Peace and Good Order, as follows, and then it takes you through a temporary transit business door-to-door canvassing and solicitation bylaw. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant.
Motion under Article 45 is accept and adopt as printed. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. This is a general bylaw, so it only requires a simple majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. Motion carries. Article 46. See if the town will vote to amend the code of the town of Harwich under Chapter 235 zoning by adding the bold and underlined language as set forth below and to act fully thereon. Do I have a positive motion, Mr. DeCosta?
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant.
All right, the motion under Article 46 is accept and adopt as printed. I'll now go to Mr. DeBarker of the Planning Board for the Planning Board report.
Mr. Moderator, Peter DeBarker, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. With respect to Article 46, building structure height in flood hazard areas, on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016, the Planning Board held a duly advertised and scheduled public hearing. All members of the public having an interest in the proposed article were welcome to attend and give comment. There was no public comment, and the board voted unanimously to recommend this article, that this article be adopted at town meeting. Respectfully submitted, Planning Board.
And I see Mr. Spitz, our town planner, on his way to give us a copy for our records of the report. Okay, thank you. Any debate on the motion under Article for Mrs. Corbett?
Are we making a presumption that people who are in the construction business can't read? Why does it have to be bold and underlined?
I think the bold and underline is simply to alert us, the voters, as to what the new language is we're considering adopting. I don't think there's any more significance to it than that, and if it is adopted, I think it will be unbolded. Any further debate? Hearing none, this is an amendment, or proposed amendment, to our zoning bylaw, so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 47. There are three different areas of the zoning bylaw that are being dealt with here. Same comment, Mrs. Corbett, with respect to the bolding. I'm not going to read the article in its entirety, but it is to amend the zoning bylaw, Chapter 325, by striking out some language and adding bolded, underlined language in 3 sections. Mr. DeCosta, do you have a motion?
I do. I move subsection A, construction signs, and subsection B, two-family dwellings, of this article be accepted and adopted with the following change. Add the following language after the last word in the first sentence of Article 47, Section A, construction signs located with written permission of the property owner.
Okay, so the motion we have under Article 47, before I get to the planning board report, only seeks to move amendments A and B in your warrant. The motion does not move to adopt C. So you're only dealing with A and B with the motion that was just made. In addition to that, there's a proposed change under A, construction signs, and it's after the last word in the first sentence. It's proposing to say located with written permission of the property owner. That's additional language that's proposed for clarification. So with that, Mr. DeBarker, Planning Board report.
With respect to Article 47, proposed zoning bylaw amendments, on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016, the Planning Board held a duly advertised and scheduled public hearing. All members of the public having an interest in the proposed articles were welcomed to attend and give comment. There was one member of the public who commented on Section B. The board voted unanimously to recommend that Section A, construction signs, and Section B, two-family dwellings in the CH1 district, be adopted at town meeting, respectively submitted. Planning Board.
Any further debate on the motion that simply moves 2 of the 3 items, Mr. DeBarker?
That's correct, and the Planning Board is in session to approve that change.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Further debate.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Romaine from Continental Drive in Harwich. The CH1 district, the commercial district, is that in East Harwich? Where is that district?
Who wants to describe the location of the CH1 district?
Sure. The CH1 district is in the Route 28 commercial zone.
Route 28 commercial zone, I see. And right now, it just allows occasional, with special permit duplex housing, is that right? It allows two-family residential housing only with special permit, is that right?
With your permission, Mr. Moderator, maybe Mr. Spitz can address that detail for me?
Absolutely. David Spitz, our town planner, and the question from the speaker is how currently is two-family housing, if at all, allowed in the CH1 district?
We're not proposing any change to the use. Two-family dwellings are currently allowed by special permit in that district.
Right.
However, that district was silent in the treatment of what lot size and a couple of other details were needed so that we felt it was necessary to add some language as a simple clarification.
Right. My question, yeah, right. My question was, when you got to B, it looked as though the language was now changed so that any lot of this size could now be a two-family residential unit. Is that not correct?
Mr. Spitz.
We allow existing lots of at least 10,000 square feet that may be vacant to be developed for the uses listed in that district.
By special permit?
Yes. Yes.
And with this language, would you still require a special permit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further debate on the motion before the meeting under Article 47? Any further debate? Hearing none, looks like you're ready for a vote. Again, the motion is seeking to adopt, and with one clarification in A, just portions A and B that are in your warrant. It does not move the proposed change for C. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. I rule that it got the necessary two-thirds majority and passed. Article 48. See if the town will vote, and I'm not going to read all these in their entirety, to propose the following amendments to the Harwich Home Rule Charter to be approved by the voters at the next annual town meeting election as follows. And then it lists various amendments. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to go through them. This article was brought forward by your Bylaw and Charter Review Committee. Mr. DeCosta, do you have a positive motion?
I do. I move to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant.
Motion under Article 48 is to accept and adopt as printed. Debate on the motion under Article 48. Mr. Kukunis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to make sure I'm in the right one. Under the section, amending section 5.5-1 as follows, Fire Department, they're removing the language that says that the fire department, the fire chief shall be appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and adding the language that the fire department shall be organized and be operated under a so-called strong chief under provisions of section 42 in chapter 48. But it does not reference who appoints or hires the fire chief. So could someone maybe tell me what's in section 42 of chapter 48? Does that address who will be hiring and appointing the fire chief at this point?
Mr. Clark. Question, if we make this change under 551, who will be hiring the fire chief?
Under the strong chief statute, I believe the Board of Selectmen hires the fire chief. The fire chief then appoints everyone else in the department.
Any further debate on the motion under Article 48, which is accept and adopt as printed? Looks like you're ready for a vote. This is a proposed amendment to our Home Rule Charter and therefore requires a two-thirds majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 49. See if the town will vote to propose the following amendment to the Harwich Home Rule Charter to be approved by the voters at the next annual town meeting election as follows. And it refers to Chapter 3, Section 6, and it proposes to add the following text. 362. Board of Selectmen shall also have the power to appoint and up to 2 alternatives to the extent permissible by general bylaw of policy-making town agencies enumerated in Chapter 7 and other agencies that are in existence on the effective date of this charter and for whom no other method of appointment is provided in this charter. Unless otherwise provided, the board shall also appoint members and up to 2 alternates to the extent permissible by general law of the other agencies, as may be hereafter established by general law, charter, bylaw, vote, or of town meeting. Do you have a positive motion?
I do. I move to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant.
Motion is to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant. The underlined text shows the additions. Are there any questions or any debate on the motion under Article 49? Hearing none, I'm going to put it to a vote. Again, this is a proposed order of amendment to our home rule charter and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 50. See if the town will vote to amend the Harwich Home Rule Charter, Chapter 7, Appointed Town Agencies, Section 7-14-2, by adding Water Department structure as set forth below. And then it restates Section 7-14-2. The Waterways Committee shall be responsible for the development of regulations for all waterways and water-dependent structures, including marine ramps, docks, piers, moorings, and aquaculture. Again, this is a request of the Harwich Waterways Committee. Do you have a positive motion?
I do.
Mr. DeCosta.
I move to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant to be approved by the voters at the next annual town election.
Motion under Article 50 is accept and adopt as printed in the warrant to be approved by the voters at the next annual town election. Any debate? Mr. Kukunis.
I have a question in this regarding someone who wants to install a dock now, let's say on a pond or a small lake. They would have had to go in front of the Conservation Commission because I believe they have jurisdiction of all near the wetlands. And now a person's going to have to go and have their dock approved by the Waterways Committee too. Am I understanding this change correctly? And I see we have our conservation agent here that's not a member of Town of Harwich, so we have to get permission to have her answer that.
So Mr. Kukunis seems to have volleyed his question over to the conservation agent, who he indicates is not a town resident or voter. And so our bylaws provide that they may address the meeting, provided nobody objects. Hearing none. Amy? If that's the result you wanted, Amy, I'm not sure.
Thank you so much. I know I stayed for a reason. Currently, any applicant who lives, say, on a great pond or any pond who wants a dock or pier has now been told that they have to go to the Waterways Committee first as an advisory board to make sure that they're not going to have any impact on navigation, and rarely does it ever. But right now, the Waterways Committee is and will continue to act as an advisory board to the Conservation Commission in that regard. I think this just formalizes that.
Thank you. Any further debate? Hearing none, I'm going to put the matter to a vote. The motion under Article 50 is accept and adopt as printed. Again, this is a proposed order of amendment to our Home Rule Charter and therefore requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 51. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sufficient sum of money to repair Ginger Plum Lane in Harwich, subject to repayment through the use of a private way betterment assessment program. Mr. DeCosta.
I move to accept and adopt as printed in the warrant and that $223,650 be appropriated for this purpose. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum pursuant to Chapter 300 of the Acts of 2014 and to issue bonds and notes therefore.
Okay, the motion under Article 51 is accept and adopt. The sum is $223,650 to be appropriated for this purpose, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum pursuant to Chapter 300 of the Acts of 2014 and issue bonds and notes therefore. Any debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. This is a proposed borrowing, requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 52. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of $20,000 to help defray the expenses of the Chase Library and the Harwich Port Library, said funds to be expended under the direction of the Chase Library and the Harwich Port Library trustees, and to act fully thereon. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $20,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
It's been moved and seconded that the article be accepted and adopted, and the sum of $20,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 53. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a sufficient sum of money for the Harwich Chamber of Commerce to promote the town and its businesses and to advance economic development initiatives for and with the town of Harwich. Said monies to be used to manage and fulfill year-round visitor resident business information services, to promote and market the town, to generate and initiate materials and activities that encourage the establishment, growth, and sustainability of businesses in Harwich, and to implement economic development objectives and activities in partnership with the town. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $25,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
The motion under Article 53 is accept and adopt. The sum is $25,000, and it's proposed to be transferred from free cash for this purpose. Is there any debate? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 54. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds a sufficient sum of money to supplement the Mass Cultural Council annual allocation for grant awards to artists, performers, and interpretive scientists who bring events to local venues which enhance the cultural experience of Harwich citizens of all ages. Mr. DeCosta.
I move that this article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant, and that $3,000 be transferred from free cash for this purpose.
It's been moved and seconded on Article 54 to be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant. The sum is $3,000. It's proposed to be transferred from free cash. Is there any debate? Looks like you're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. Article 55. See if the town will vote to propose the following amendment to the Harwich Home Rule Charter to be approved by the voters at the next annual town election and to act fully thereon. I'm not going to read this in its entirety, but it sets up a new section, Chapter 6, Section 9, the Charter Enforcement Commission. And I don't have a positive motion from Mr. DeCosta. Mrs. Hall.
I move that Article 55 be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant.
Motion under Article 55 is that the article be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant. Debate. Mrs. Hall.
Article 55 seeks to establish a 5-member independently elected Charter Enforcement Commission, the purpose of which is to help ensure adherence by our town officials to the Harwich Home Rule Charter, which is the governing document of our town. The entire function of this commission is to respond to complaints by Harwich citizens regarding possible violations of the Charter, determine the validity of the issue, and seek correction. At the end of the day, if violations continue, there is an option in this for the Commission to take court action. This provision, this particular provision, is the only thing that gives this amendment any real teeth. However, I believe that under ordinary circumstances, this action will largely be unnecessary because these things will be handled in-house. Tonight's vote is only the first step in what is a 2-year process as required before a charter amendment. If it is passed tonight, it will be included in the next year's election, which is 2017. And if it's adopted, the 2018 ballot would see the election of the members of the commission itself. This does not have the support of either the Finance Committee or the Board of Selectmen. There have been many, many concerns raised about it. Mostly, in my particular opinion, red herrings. It's not a policing commission. This is not a body that's going to go out looking for violations. It is purely in place to respond to concerns brought up by citizens. And some people feel that this could be included in a non-elected board. Or come under the purview of the Charter Review Committee, but basically the Charter Review Committee is appointed by the selectmen, which is, makes it somewhat unlikely that the selectmen are going to appoint a board that actually is going to try to correct them, if you follow me. Anyhow, the beauty of the commission is it will be completely independent, completely in the hands of the voters. One of the questions I've been asked over and over again is to cite areas of concern right now, name names, and who is not operating according to the charter. But that really isn't the purpose of this exercise at this point. I prefer to think that it won't be necessary, and that in anticipation of this body coming into being, that the selectmen will begin to really take a good hard look at the way things are functioning now, and to take the next 2 years to really review and correct some of the practices that are going on that have caused people concern. The Finance Committee, Mr. DeCosta says it will chill volunteerism. I believe what actually chills volunteerism in this town is being passed over for appointments because you don't have the right opinions. And there are any number of examples of that with committees being left vacant, despite the fact that people are stepping up and putting in requests to serve. That's a whole other subject. But the bottom line here is if everyone is operating in accordance with the charter, then no one has anything to be concerned about in this amendment, and I would ask for your support in supporting its placement on the ballot next year. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion. Let's get it back in front of me here. Under Article 55. Mr. DeCosta.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Although the proponent describes the intent of this article as one thing, the Finance Committee looked more at the wording of this proposed charter exchange, and what is written in black and white right in front of you does not exactly match the intent. Of the 15 towns on Cape Cod, 2 towns, Bourne and Provincetown, have similar committees. Both of these towns have limited the scope of enforcement to include the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the moderator, the town administrator or acting town administrator, and the school committee. This is about 20 people. What is written in front of you is a far greater reach of power, which includes all of the members of every appointed committee, every elected official, and oddly enough, every employee of the town. According to the latest town report, that's over 800 positions this article goes after. The Harwich Home Rule Charter presently states that vacancies in elected town agencies shall be filled by the Board of Selectmen together with the remaining members until the next election. This proposal will pick their own replacements on the commission. They won't ask the Board of Selectmen to be involved in that. That's different than every other elected official body in the town. Again, different from every other committee, this commission will not submit a budget. These elected officials will instead have a town fund established for what they determine is reasonable expenses. When the proponent of this article came before the Finance Committee, we asked what happens if they run out of money in the middle of a trial. She said they would put the trial on hold until the next town meeting. Does it seem right to ask someone who is on trial for violating the charter to wait 4, 6, or 10 months until the next town meeting so that more money can be voted to prosecute them? The proponents of this article insist that if everyone is following the charter, there will be no problems. There is nothing to fear. And yet, in both Bourne and Provincetown, there have been accusations where the enforcement committee themselves were the ones that misinterpreted the charter, and they falsely accused an innocent party. It took a team of lawyers to convince them that they were the ones that were wrong. And in Bourne, when the committee got the wrong answer from town council, they hired another lawyer to ask for a new opinion to get the same answer. And guess who pays for both sets of lawyers? You do. You see, getting elected to this committee does not necessarily mean you know anything about the charter. There are no qualifications or restrictions at all to be on this commission. In fact, if you support this article tonight and it passes a future ballot, I encourage all of my sitting selectmen to run for this commission and hold both offices. I would rather have someone in there that deals with the charter on a regular basis set the rules than someone who does not. There are no provisions in this article to differentiate between major charter violations from minor ones. No provisions to offer changes when the charter itself is at fault instead of the member. And the proponent can talk about the intent of this, but it's not written within the article. To me, this is a very divisive article. If we have a problem with people not following the charter, it is probably because the charter is out of date or the committee member was never given proper training or guidance on the charter. The town clerk swears them in and hands them a notebook, and that's it. Wouldn't you prefer to have an education committee that is charged with educating our unpaid volunteers instead of possibly prosecuting them? Wouldn't you rather have an education committee that revives the Know Your Town series to the Know Your Charter series? Wouldn't you rather ask the moderator to moderate a quarterly roundtable discussion on the charter so there would be a place to talk about this living document? Instead of paying for town council to come here and defend our unpaid volunteers from prosecution, wouldn't we be better served to have town council come here twice a year to teach a class called Respect Your Charter for the members to take? Wouldn't it be better to post their names on a wall of fame after completing this class instead of on the wall of shame as promoted in this document? Instead of following two towns with a commission that uses prosecution as a way to make their members comply, shouldn't Harwich lead all 15 towns on the Cape with a committee that educates and rewards the achievements of their unpaid volunteers? Isn't that what Harwich is more about? I want to thank our town employees for the job they do. I want to especially thank our unpaid volunteers for their hours of service. And I want to thank our elected officials, even the lousy ones, because they took the time to take out papers and run for public office. If you think one of your town employees is doing a bad job, go to the town administrator. It's a free service. If you think one of your appointed volunteers is violating the charter, go to the appointing authority. And if you think one of your elected officials is doing a lousy job or violating the charter, instead of going to the town clerk to get their names posted on the wall of shame, go to the town clerk and take out papers and take their seat away from them. That will give you far more satisfaction. The Finance Committee is asking you to vote no on this one.
Further debate on the motion under Article 55. Mrs. Cebula.
Thank you. I rise to speak against this article. Both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have voted to IP this article and not support it. Over the past years, there have been many sections of our charter that have been the subject of differing interpretations. The Board of Selectmen, and not just this sitting board, have spent time and legal fees obtaining legal advice from professional attorneys who have the knowledge and access to things like case law. This Board of Selectmen has provided the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee a sheaf of documents on these various issues. A few of these we've already passed at this town meeting, some housekeeping things. There have been suggestions to have educational sessions on the components of the charter, and this is a good idea. However, it does not address the main issue of lack of agreement on the interpretation of various sections of the charter. Educational meetings will not solve that difference of opinion, since the solution will be to ask town council for advice. And recall that in a prior town meeting, we voted to clarify language regarding the library staff after numerous conversations over many years as to who was in charge of the library. If you recall that, it was we removed one word from the charter. We went from professional library staff to library staff, and we ended multiple years of conversation. That's what you do, is you clarify the language. Let's keep in mind that if there are issues of not following some segment of the charter, we are all volunteers and not lawyers. We are not well versed in charter issues. If we make mistakes due to lack of understanding and due to the written language contained in the charter, that does not call for disciplinary action. First, fix the language. Whatever was the intention, that intention did not get stated clearly. And it is the intention that is causing the difference in interpretation. How can we as a town hold elected officials, appointed committee members, and town employees accountable to a document that has some interpretation issues? This is simply not fair. And while there have been references to numerous charter violations, very few, if any, have ever been presented to town administration with details as to alleged violations so that the issue can be addressed. There is an existing process to deal with issues, either real or perceived, and it's called town council. Another established process is called amend the charter. The proposed committee, this proposed committee petition has flaws that need to be addressed before being considered by us. We have non-legal people will be presented as a judiciary function and to be the interpreters of a legal document, the charter. Usually people who sit in a judiciary function have years of legal training and years of being a lawyer before they get to be judges. There is no avenue of appeal in this article. If you get called into the woodshed and you don't agree with their interpretation of the charter, you have nowhere to go to appeal. You could sue the town, and then we all pay for that. But the committee can take you to court. There is no right of appeal, no provision for arbitration. And remember that this is a small group of people and their interpretation over your interpretation. So if you don't agree with their interpretation, because everybody's interpreting, fix the charter first. Fix the language so it's clear. I would ask that you not support this article and that town meeting sends these issues back to the Bylaw and Charter Review Committee for them to propose a language clarification for a next town meeting. The people who wrote the charter worked very hard at this, and it's a pretty decent charter, but there are sections that need to be clarified. And before we start holding people accountable to a document that isn't clear, we need to do the clarifications and change the language. Only then, after we fix the language and after educational sessions, can we even think about something like the charter enforcement provisions of this petition. We have to fix the charter language first before we start holding people accountable. I hope that you will vote against this.
Further debate on the motion under Article 55.
Mr. Moderator.
Mrs. Hall.
I am one of the people who wrote the charter. I chaired the Charter Commission in 1986 and 1987. The charter is written in very plain English. As things have changed, portions of the charter have been adjusted and changed. However, during the 4 terms I served on the Board of Selectmen, subsequent to being chairman of the Charter Commission, we didn't have a lot of trouble interpreting the charter. We understood it quite clearly. I don't recall too many instances of any real debate in those years about what it meant. My observation in recent years is that there, and I have sitting over at my chair some 53 pages of legal opinions about that we've paid serious money for over interpretations of the charter. My overall observation on that is that mostly what has come up is seeking legal interpretations of things that we don't agree with in the charter and are trying to make work in a way that we will agree with, mostly coming from the Board of Selectmen. So differing interpretations are mostly coming up when you don't like what the charter says in plain English. Mr. DaCosta and Mr. Bulla both have outlined some really great programs to educate about the charter, and whether or not this motion passes tonight, and I have no idea how you'll see it, I hope they pursue those avenues, because really not very much has been done up to now to really educate people about what the charter means, what it does, and what's expected of them under the charter. And if we accomplish nothing more this year than to maybe raise some awareness and put a shot over the bow of the powers that be today in Harwich, and maybe get a serious look at some of the things that are being done that are not in compliance with the charter. At least we will have accomplished that much. I will say we were not expecting this article to come up tonight. The Charter Review Committee chairman was planning to be here tomorrow night to give his report. I can tell you that the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee does support this article. Thank you. I'm done.
Further debate, Mr. Lamantia.
It's kind of clear that there are a lot of people who have not written the charter, and they have to read it and try and interpret it. Over the past couple of years, we've had at least 12 situations in which we've asked our legal counsel what a particular part of the charter meant. And we have a bunch of answers to it. And you need to do that. Just tonight you saw changes that came through. The selectmen about 2 years ago realized how much difficulty there was with the charter. We know the charter has to be followed, but to follow it you have to know what it says. So we've done a couple of things. We've asked town council to handle and clarify particular points. We have put together a situation where actually town council has come to meetings of the committees and department heads and presented information not only about the charter, but about open meeting law and ethics. And we will continue that. The town clerk, when she swears somebody's in, gives them a whole host of information. We know we have to do more in that area. And I think, quite frankly, it'll take 2 or 3 years to come close to clarifying everything in the charter. And once we get that, then it's fine. But I think right now, it's a dangerous situation because of the lack of clarity and good writing in the charter. Thank you.
Further debate. I've got this gentleman here.
Yeah, Alan Peterson, East Harwich. I'd like to move the question.
Do I hear a second? All right, a motion's been made to move the question. It's been seconded. It means to terminate debate. It's non-debatable. Requires a 3/4 majority to pass. All those in favor of terminating debate on the motion under Article 55, so signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by saying no. It's a unanimous vote, and I so declare it. So we'll now go to a vote on the motion before you under Article 55, which is that Article 55 be accepted and adopted as printed in the warrant. Again, this is a proposed Home Rule Charter amendment, so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion as read, so signify by saying aye. And those opposed by saying no. No. The motion does not carry. It being after 10:30.
Mr. Moderator, move to adjourn the annual town meeting till tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
It's after 10:30, and we generally don't take up any new business after that hour. Tomorrow evening, we have a special town meeting that starts at 8. So I'm pretty comfortable that we can finish the annual warrant if we can get here at 7 o'clock, between 7 and 8, and then do our special town meeting, and then we can go home. So that's why this motion, I think, is being brought at this hour, since we're now after 10:30. So all those in favor of adjourning the annual town meeting until tomorrow evening here at 7 o'clock, so signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Meeting's adjourned till tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Hope to see you all then. We've still got some important business to do, and I think we can get it done fairly quickly. Thank you for tonight.